Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting on the chairman to arrive, but as it has gone 7 o'clock, we're going to start the meeting. So as such, I'm just going to ask members to elect a chairman just to start the meeting until the chairman arrives. So can I just have a nomination from members, please?
I'm quite happy to start it off.
Well, we need a proposal.
Yeah. Hopefully we won't get too far into it. So I think the first thing to say is welcome to the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Are there any apologies?
Yes, thank you. We have apologies submitted from Councillor Alison Swaddle.
We're assuming that the other members are going to turn up. Minutes of the previous meeting, anyone? Everyone happy with those? Okay. We'll leave those for Guy to sign when he arrives. Any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Public question time. Do we have any?
None received.
Questions? Thank you, Callum. Member question time?
Again, none received.
None received. So we move to the local police service update, and we have Andy to talk to us.
Hello. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well.
Andy Cranage.
Hello.
You.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Excellent. Hello. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for inviting me here this evening. I've got some slides to go through, 10-15 minutes, I think, worth of time. And then I think there's some questions also that have been put forward for answering, which I only just got about 5 minutes ago. So forgive me, I will be able to answer some of them, but some I have to take away and for some detail and then come back to you if that's okay. So I'm going to put up my slides. Hopefully have come up now. Just confirm they have for me if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Andy.
Spookily, I can see them on the screen now, so that's quite strange. At least I'm not looking at myself and then looking at slides, which is nice. So, as I say, thank you for inviting me here today. I'll just check the time so I don't go on too long. I'm the local area police commander for Bracknell and Wokingham. As you probably all know, Bracknell and Wokingham is one police area now. It's been that for some years. And I was appointed the LPA commander in November last year. Prior to that was Felicity Parker. She's moved on to a new role and I've joined as the superintendent. But some of you may or not met me before. I was the deputy commander for about 2.5 years in Bracknell and Wokingham. So the area is not completely new to me. So it was quite nice that I come back and see some of the people I was working with before. So already built up some of those relationships. But prior to that, I was doing a year as a secondment in the force around developing neighbourhood police. And I know there's some neighbourhood policing questions a bit later on, so I'll be able to give you some detail around that. So I did that and then got promoted and am now the area commander for Bracknell and Wokingham. So I'll move to the next slide. So what I've been asked to do is just talk about some areas of focus, if I can get the slides, of course.
Andy, can I just stop you for a second?
Of course, can.
So I can give up being the chair of the meeting and hand it over to Guy now that he's arrived.
Yes,
Cool.
thank you for starting. Apologies for that. I have been caught up in traffic and only just got here. So please carry on.
Thank you. As long as you don't blame me for the traffic, that's okay.
No, I can't.
Lovely, thank you. So I've been asked just to talk through some areas of focus from the last 12 months. I've got some crime figures as well, which I'll talk through, and then sort of the areas of focus for the next 12 months. And well, I'll talk about some partnership work we've done around some problem solving, and then I'll talk about where the future looks for the next year, or the early stages of those discussions, really. And that's kind of what I'll be talking about. So the areas of focus for the last year, really, and none of these up here should be a surprise to you whatsoever. The serious violence duty, so all the work that's happening around serious violence, especially with young men, young adults, linked into CDL, so county drugs lines, etc., carrying of knives, all those kind of things that sit around that kind of antisocial behaviour linked into it as well. And that duty that's come down from the government, us as statutory organisations, about what are we going to do to tackle it. And I'll talk some more in a minute in a bit more detail around the violence reduction unit. And then Thames Valley Together and the serious violence dashboard, but I'll do that towards the end because it's still very much a live piece of work. We're developing strategies, and I'll talk about how that works together. But ultimately, the serious violence duty was about taking a public health approach to tackling serious violence and the causes of serious violence. So what is it that drives somebody to do it? Why do they get involved in it? And it's about working with the local authority, the police, fire and rescue, justice organisations, probation, youth offending service, and health. A whole group of people to look at what that approach needs to, how that approach needs to take place. And that was one of the significant pieces of work from last year that's continuing this year, and I'll talk through that about the future of it in the final slide. Domestic abuse was a very much a key element of policing and partnership work in the last year. We all know the significant number of incidents of domestic abuse that take place. About a third of all our crime is domestic abuse in policing. So it's a real important focus for us to understand the causes, the reasons, how we manage our perpetrators, how we support those who are victims in what are often very complex and very difficult situations, especially my officers find themselves in, with having to make decisions about how best to deal with an incident. So still a focus for the coming year as well, but that was certainly one of the areas of focus from previous year, and I'll talk about some statistics around that performance-wise in the next slide. Neighbourhood policing antisocial behaviour. As I said, I've just spent a year away doing some work around embedding the College of Policing guidelines for neighbourhood policing. There's 7 guidelines. I've been embedding them in the force. Linked into that is a number of reviews we did internally around neighbourhood policing, and neighbourhood policing is very much linked to problem solving. Now, problem solving, it should go across all policing, but it's especially prevalent within the areas of neighbourhood policing, where there's a lot of partnership approaches to how we tackle incidents and problems. And they can be small problems, or they can be very large, complex, long-term problems that are going to take a number of years to fix. So it's about taking that model and implement it onto the LPA. And I know there's some questions about numbers, etc., a bit later on, which I'll talk about. But essentially, what happened with our neighbourhood policing team in Bracknell and Wokingham, it was something that started when I was actually the deputy there and continued when I left. It's about reviewing what the structure looks like. What we now have structure-wise within neighbourhood policing is we have problem-solving teams and we have geographic neighbourhood teams. So if you read across the geographic neighbourhood team, they're the officers you would see on the ground day to day alongside our PCSOs who form part of neighbourhood policing. And then problem solving teams are the teams that can come in and parachute in, to give it a crude description really, but come and parachute in and look at that long-term problem solving and get to grips with some of those more challenging issues around repeat callers, about locations, about the issues that are important to the community, for example. So that's what we've done with our neighbourhood policing, and that very much is around looking at how we tackle antisocial behaviour. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in some of the work that the council are actually doing through the CSP, etc., around their new enforcement team. And probably towards the end of the year, it was very much the horrendous issues around Wayne Couzens and the death of Sarah Everard that put a real focus against or upon violence against women and girls. I've been at a conference all day around that, Thames Valley Police hosted conference, which had numerous partners and people from other forces in, looking at what are we doing around this? What is the issue? how do we understand the issue, and how do we look at tackling it? And again, I will talk about that a little bit later on, what that's going to look like within Thames Valley. So they were our areas of focus. I'd picked out 4. There's more things going on than that, as you probably appreciate, but I've picked out 4 of the kind of key areas from the last year. And again, I picked some of this up when I came back to the area in November time, and some of these will probably always be an area of focus for policing and the partnership. So I'm going to go on to some statistics now. Let's get this to move. So this is taken from our dashboard, if you like, our Thames Valley Police dashboard, and I picked a number of key areas that often get talked about in terms of performance. And what you see there is the police area, so LPA, local police area, what the force performance looks like, and then a bit of a description around where our force position is. So how do we compare to the other 12 police, or other 11, sorry, we've got 12 police areas, so the other 11 police areas across the Thames Valley. So when you look at that, in that column on the right, we're not doing too bad, but then you've got to go into the detail and the context, and that often tells the story, really. So the first one I'll just talk about is burglary, a 15% reduction. That's what we're trying to achieve at a force level. So on the left-hand side is the offence or offence type category, and what we're trying to achieve as a force. So as an LPA, our reduction in burglary offences is down 38%. As a force, it's down 50%, and just a bit of information really on the right-hand side. I think, when you look at the reasons behind that, that's often now around we've got better crime prevention advice, we've got better cross-border information intelligence, we're able to target people more effectively, and that's one of the things we do suffer, especially in Bracknell on the LP. I know that's not what you're not Bracknell Council, but certainly in Bracknell there's a lot of cross-border, and there's to a degree in terms of certain categories of burglary in Wokingham. But overall, it's a good positive picture around a 38% reduction, and part of that is also around people now working from home, so there's less opportunity for people to do burglary. Robbery, again, a 12% reduction on the police area. That's good news. The robbery issue generally that we find within either Wokingham or Bracknell is around young people on young people, or it's drug related. A person has gone to do a drug deal or buy some drugs and it hasn't gone according to plan, and it ends up in a robbery. There's not many of them at all, and you're very safe essentially in terms of Wokingham. You're not going to walk down the street and get robbed. Is pretty much the position we have. Again, a focus on knife crime, and that links into serious violence. So again, we're looking at an increase in what's called formal action. So there's a charge, there's a caution, or there's some form of positive disposal or referral or something like that around someone linked into knife crime. It's around carrying it, it's around using it as a weapon, etc. So we're at 30% there, and we're above what the force is wanting us to achieve. The story on the next two is not particularly good. And this isn't just unique to Thames Valley Police. This is actually a nationwide issue in terms of rape and sexual offences, and does link very much into the work around violence against women and girls. So as a force there, as an LPA there, you can see the reductions, the increase in charges we want to achieve, but we've had a complete opposite around a reduction. That could be around the confidence of people coming through as reporting the crimes. It's about confidence of victims that the criminal justice system will believe their story, will support them. It's about not wanting to be re-traumatized through the court process. It's about the speediness of actually getting the cases to court. There's a whole plethora of issues that need to be addressed at a national and local level around those two areas of offending, and that's very much what the violence against women and girls is going to look at tackling. A more positive point at the bottom is our percentage rate in terms of where formal action is taken, i.e. someone is charged, cautioned, or out of court disposal, is increased for up to 11%, and we're looking for an increase of 6%. So again, we're doing above the force average, but there's always areas to improve and work to be done. So that's a snapshot really of the last year. And we're not quite to the end of the financial year, of course, but we're not far off it. So this would probably be where we will be at that particular period. So I'll move now on to the work we've been doing within the partnership. So check where our time was, 10 minutes. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk through here is some of the work we've been doing with the council and being active members of the Community Safety Partnership. I think Narinda should be on the call here somewhere. So Narinda, the Community Safety Manager, working very closely with her and her teams around how we manage some of the issues on the local area. And now as a partnership, we've looked at some of this stuff. So when you look at, there's a number of comments in there. The first one I'll talk around is car cruises. Now, these are the people that like to jazz their cars up and max power them out, or whatever it's called, and go around with noisy exhausts and displaying them, spinning their wheels, etc., be it in car parks, where we've got Sainsbury's or something similar to that. This isn't unique, again, to Wokingham. It happens all across the country, and indeed in Bracknell and Wokingham itself. But a really positive thing around the response locally with the council and the various members is that there's been a lot of work done around the landlords of locations where people may choose to do these activities, putting speed bumps in, barriers, all sorts of anti-car kind of things to stop people being able to fly around car parks, etc. CCTV has been improved in various places. Certain areas of car parks are closed off, so people can't do that. And a lot of this work comes through the problem-solving group that sits as part of the Community Safety Partnership. That's where a number of members from different parts of the community, different statutory organisations get together. They look at the problems that we believe we have across the borough, and then work together at what potential solutions there may be to achieve positive outcomes around this. And again, part of the car cruise approach was around that target hardening. In addition to that was the use of police powers. So we've got section, well, I'll keep it simple, antisocial behaviour orders and notices, and also people who don't have insurance. So we've tackled them through those kind of areas as well. And also there's some work going on around a public space protection order, which will allow wider management and enforcement of people that are acting in antisocial behaviour with vehicles. It's worked because I'm now getting more complaints from Bracknell about people with car cruises. So we've probably shifted it from Wokingham and moved it over to Bracknell. So we've got to do some work again with Bracknell Council now in a very similar vein to deal with that issue around car cruises. Just talk about a persistent caller. Again, something that happens, and it doesn't just impact Thames Valley Police, it impacts the health services, it impacts yourselves as councillors, where someone who isn't necessarily getting the right support for whatever reason that may be, may have mental health issues. And in this case, I'm talking about here, this particular person he was a frequent missing person, often called as a fear for welfare for us and the ambulance, and causing a lot of time to try and find him when in fact he wasn't necessarily missing, etc. So working with the housing team, we found out that actually the housing provision wasn't suitable for him or him and the family. So again, working together, we found some opportunities to improve how and the way he contacts organisations around essentially a traffic light system in terms of how he felt and who we would then go and contact. And that reduced the number of calls to all parties involved. There's a lot of schools intervention, especially around knife crime. So again, as the problem-solving meeting, work to deliver the knife crime packages within schools. Again, talking about the push-pull relationships within the schools in terms of early intervention and prevention. Data from local partnership meetings we have around knife crime, so identifying those who may be at risk came as part of this. And we've worked with a number of charities and organisations to enable people who might not want to talk to the police or to the council or to a statutory organisation to talk to other organisations from the third sector to get some assistance around their concerns and their thoughts around knife crime and ideas, and especially around family as well, just understanding the risks posed from this. And again, part of that was we've got some people in some schools when we've gone there who there's some stand around the police cadets who are very interested now in joining the police cadets. So again, it's a really good piece of work to just raise awareness around what opportunities there are to keep yourself safe, and opportunities as well to develop as a young person. And I know some of those people are joining the police cadets now. We also do joint licensing around targeted hotspots. That can be around alcohol, could be about knife crime and purchasing knives to people who are underage. And again, working with the council and other partner agencies to come in and assist with that. It is a really important part of kind of our partnership approach to keeping people safe. And the other part we're looking at doing at the moment is probably re-injecting the work around neighbourhood action groups and just seeing how they need to be revitalised, I think is probably a good way of describing it, especially through COVID, made it very, very difficult for us to meet. Yeah, Teams is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't always deliver those building of relationships that you want from those face-to-face conversations. So again, there's some work that we need to do just around those to really develop them, because they're a really important part of developing problem solving about how an action group locally can take some ownership. I know there's some questions around speed, and I think later on in the list of questions that I've got, Speedwatch is an absolutely wonderful example of the community mobilising to keep their location safe. But I can touch on that a little bit later on. So they're just a number of examples. And again, I'm not going into too much detail because I'm very conscious I'm already about 15 minutes into talking to you. I just want to now touch on 4 areas, sorry, if I can count properly, a future activity. One of the really exciting things for me is the Safety and Enforcement Service that hopefully, I can't see people nodding on the screens there, but hopefully people are aware of it. Yeah, I can see some nodding, that's good. Aware of that service. It's literally coming online from April. It's a really, really good opportunity for us to join up with neighbourhood policing and work together around enforcement, around antisocial behaviour, around visibility. I was only talking to Narinda earlier today. There is potentially an opportunity here around community safety accreditation scheme. CSAS, I think it's brought down to an acronym, but essentially what that gives is would potentially give the enforcement team, so Thames Valley Police, the Chief Constable, would give the ability for those working within that safety and enforcement team the ability to deliver fixed penalty notices for a range of different offences. So give a bit of teeth really to the enforcement team. So something we're definitely going to take away, Narinda and myself and the safety enforcement team, and look at how that may work. And a really strong part of that is at very early stages, but we're going to do joint problem solving training. So we're all working together on the same page, if you like, when it comes to problem solving, which I think is a really important part, because, problem solving to Thames Valley Police is quite defined, and we need to make sure that our partners and who we work with have a similar understanding and are happy with that. So that's a bit of work we'll do with that team very early on. One thing I'm really pushing locally within my response teams is around involve community services and referrals. I think there's a gap where officers go to an incident, be it hate crime, be it a domestic, be it an assault, be it some antisocial behaviour. And I'm really pushing for my officers to be really inquisitive and really professionally curious about why this is happening. Why have we been called there? What is it that's actually driven an individual to call the police? Because actually behind that, and people know about trauma-informed policing and ACEs and all those kind of things, I would hope, that, often there's a reason behind something. I often use the example of a domestic where there's been no violence, it's been an argument between a couple, it's all about financials, it's all about money. Officers will go, they'll fill out the relevant kind of documentation, there's no criminal acts that have taken place, but the family needs some help. But the minute we kind of walk away, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, we kind of do everything we can at that point. But I think there's some work, and we have it at the moment around some navigators that sit with Involve that we can refer people to. Involve then have that group of, have the ability then to refer on to some services that may well assist that couple, those people, in terms of dealing with whatever the issue is that triggered that particular incident. So, rather than we don't have to go the option of arresting people all the time, in a circumstance like that, what is an option there that allows my officers to do something positive, which will hopefully prevent that offending again, if you want to call it offending. The serious surveillance duty, knife crime and exploitation. We've got a partnership approach to this, a serious violence partnership. We're right in the middle of writing that strategy at the moment, but that's very much going to take on board the stuff I said earlier around the whole system approach to reducing serious violence. The serious violence dashboard is data Thames Valley Police have created around identifying potential people we may be working with at an early stage to really get into working with them and divert them away. And Thames Valley Together is data from a whole range of different organisations. So it's data from yourselves, it's data from hospitals, it's data from health, it's data from doctors, schools, Thames Valley Police, probation, etc. All in one place that allow us to identify groups of people, individuals that we may want to work with to actually divert them away from exploitation and knife crime. And the final thing I'll just talk around is cybercrime and fraud. I think there's a couple of elements to cybercrime. When you think around abuse online, be it through bullying, be it through also then offending online through sexual offending, especially relevant to violence against women and girls. That is a really important part of how we understand how to keep people safe within the online environment, and also how we prevent people from offending in the online environment. And especially when you think about fraud, the amount of fraud that's taken place. So I, in fact, have been a victim of fraud very recently on my mobile phone. I've taken over a new contract and somebody keeps buying games on it somehow, and I've no idea how. So again, how do we prevent that? How do we understand that? And I think there's a real bit of work we do with trading standards as a partnership around supporting people around that kind of fraud, and then the rogue trader kind of side of stuff. I did say I would mention very briefly about the violence against women and girls, and just talk. I'll be very quick because I appreciate the time here. Just around, there's 4 pillars that Thames Valley and as a partnership will be looking at. So building trust and confidence within the police, you know, so that people will come forward and have trust that with the police and the criminal justice system, that the matter will be taken as far as possible. A perpetrator focus, so who is committing these offences? How do we manage them? How do we tackle them on a regular basis? It's about location-based or place-based. We can predict some of these areas where offending may take place. Operation Vigilance is an example of that in Oxford, where nighttime economy and perpetrators of sexual offences are targeted through covert tactics. And then a whole better victim engagement process, so people don't disengage with us and lose that opportunity and confidence within policing and the criminal justice system. And partnership plays an important role in delivering those 4 pillars. So that is the end of the presentation. So I will hopefully stop presenting that. Hopefully that stopped. Yeah, I can see myself there. So I just open up to any questions, really. I know I've got a series of questions that have been sent to me, but I don't know if you want to pause at this point if there's any direct questions from the presentation.
Yes, members, thank you for that, Andrew. Members, hands up if you've got any questions here. I've got a few myself. Sam and Paul, you sent some in as well, didn't you, Paul? Okay, and Clive. Okay, Sam, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Andy. Really detailed here. Just wanted to talk about page 5. Really quite concerning that the charges of rape offences are, according, if I'm reading this correctly, that they're up over 300% from the force average, 21% being the force average, and it's 69%.
Yeah.
What's the sort of the plan in place to, you know, to help bring this down? Is there sort of education piece, or you know, taking these people out of where they are, you know, society? Well, what's the plan really to help bring this down and protect these people?
Yeah, I think probably the context there needs to be about the numbers, which I don't have on that, unfortunately. What I was trying, and what we've got to understand on this data as well, which, forgive me, I didn't mention, this is data across the LPA. What I can't do is really frustrating for me, is I can't split that data between Bracknell and Wokingham at the moment. It's something I've asked our service delivery team to do for me, because it's no use for me telling you that, because you want to know the data in Wokingham, not Bracknell and Wokingham. So it's a bit of work, and it's why it was delayed getting this presentation to you, because I was trying to fix that issue. So forgive me for that. It will happen. But put that to one side. It's still not good. This is, as I said, this is a whole national thing. This is really a real focus on the whole violence against women and girls bit of work that is taking place. A lot of the issues around the reduction in rape charges is there's a lack of confidence in the criminal justice process from victims. They don't feel they're going to be believed when they go into the criminal justice system. They also don't want to be re-traumatized. So how do we minimise that re-traumatization of the issues that are taking place? There's delays, there's court delays, which then extends it. I think the average, and Narinda, if she's here, she might be helping me with some of these figures. There was, I think the average of getting a case to court is around 700 days, wasn't it, Narinda? I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. I'm looking at you now on the screen.
Quite recall in total, but it was around about that. So, and 17.1 days for some offences around domestic abuse, and the average sort of times are really quite delayed in comparison to pre-COVID times. So it's really COVID's had a massive knock-on effect in the number of days now taking to get either a charging decision or moving on, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Narinda. Yeah, absolutely right. So I'll reassure you, it's an absolute focus of the violence against women strategy. And when you look at the pillars, that strategy will be out for everybody to read. I think either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. And within that is the description of how we will tackle perpetrators. Well, there's research that says someone who does commit a sexual offence or a rape is actually known to us in the criminal justice system. It's a very highly likely that they are. So we also need to understand around how because often it's victim focus, isn't it? There's a victim. How do we look after that victim? What do we do to support them, instead of how do we identify people who may be offenders, and what do we do about managing them? Which may sound like a strange thing to say, and you say, why haven't we done it before? It's because it's been so victim focused to try and actually get the best for them. I think there's a needs to be a move towards actually, let's identify these victims at an early stage and manage them and deal with them as soon as we can. And I think it's just an acceptance as well that we need to pull our socks up, quite frankly, in this particular area of policing and really make some strides. And that is why there's a very much a strong element of that in the violence against women plan that's coming up. It's recognised and we need to do better work on it, essentially.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sam? Okay, Anne.
Thank you for that. That was all very interesting. I was just going to say about the statistics on page 5. What sort of period of time are you comparing figures over? Because I was wondering how much of an impact the pandemic has really had on those statistics.
Yeah. So we have to be careful. You're absolutely right. So the burglary figures is essentially a 5-year comparison, pretty much. So forgive me. It's kind of, this is where I've got to get better with this data, and it's really frustrated me to really get and identify exactly what this data looks like to give us that really good, clear picture. But yeah, it is factored in these figures, the pandemic. So we know that actually there's less burglaries in that period. So we compare the period when there wasn't a pandemic, if that makes sense. So yeah, it is comparison to what would be, if I can call it, a normal year, if there is such a thing. We've got a new normal now, I suppose, haven't we? So that's why. But before that, when you look at that 5-year trajectory of burglary, it was a downward trend. And I think that's to do with the fact that home security is better for a start. The fact that people are changing the way they do their working and their home more. We've got better at detecting it as well in terms of identifying groups. Sharing information is a really important thing. So, Wokingham suffers quite a lot of burglaries when it's about family gold. They are organised criminal groups that do that. That's not somebody in your local community going out and burgling someone's house randomly. They are organised criminals that do this as their living, sadly. So we've got much better at that cross-border discussion, that cross-border sharing of information and intelligence. So I won't give away some of the tactics. I was about to, then I better not. But so we're better at identifying a group that may be coming out of London. We can pretty much plot them and understand what's happening, and then we jointly go and target those individuals and get them locked up for quite some time. There was a group we had, Operation Ollivander, when I was actually the deputy there. Organised crime group from Ireland, Southern Ireland. Those people now are locked up for about 8 to 9 years each. The whole group it took a lot of effort, but we got there. But it was going to Ireland. It was working with Ireland and the counties south of Thames Valley as well to get these people, and they're all over Manchester, they're all over the country doing it, but we managed to nail them. So yeah, absolutely, you're right. Yeah, that is all taken into account in those statistics there.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. Thank you. And the other thing I was going to ask about was, I noticed you don't have a specific activity that you're mentioning here about drugs. And I was just wondering, I've got a particular issue in Woodley where I live, that there's a particular street where residents are noticing drug dealing every single evening about 7 o'clock. How would that be dealt with by the police?
Well, if you ask your residents to call us, please. If an act's taking place, 999. If it's not 101, and I know there's a question about 101 later on, and I will address that. If it's 999 and in progress, they will try and get someone out to it. What we've got to balance is our old threat and harm. You know, we've got incidents of domestic abuse taking place, incidents of all sorts of things taking place. So, you know, it's about the availability of resourcing at that one particular time, whether someone can be dispatched there. For me, this is something that should come to the problem solving team or the neighbourhood team. It's a neighbourhood issue. We can then understand, speak to the residents, get a picture about what is taking place. I have a tasking team on the police area that can then do some work. They're plainclothes officers, so we can tackle it. So I urge your residents to please tell us.
Well, I understand that one particular resident has told the police quite a lot, you see, and nobody ever comes out. He has told me.
Right. Can you send the details to me, please? Because I will look at it. I think there is some work we need to do, and this is around engagement as well from a policing perspective, where people do contact us, and sometimes we don't get back to them, and it's just not good enough. And I just think, you know, just that phone call back, that conversation with someone, and the value of that. And I've done this in other areas. You know, you speak to a resident who reports something, they'll tell you something else as well. You know, or you go around and talk to them and have a cup of tea, and they'll tell you something else that builds that picture about what is happening in an area. And I think that's a really important part of neighbourhood policing that we need to start to really develop. And I think with the restructure we've done on the LPA, there's some challenges coming, and I'll talk about that in a minute, just over the next year, just around the uplift of officers and what that means. But I think when we get past that, and we've got some more officers, then I think that's a place we need to get to, where, you know, we get people to do that kind of direct neighbourhood policing. PCSOs are an important part of that. You know, it's not just about police officers' warranted powers. There is for enforcement sometimes, but actually that community engagement and understanding, that's really where the PCSO should be of great value. And also now we've got the enforcement team coming on board. Again, I think that's where we really join up, where if the police aren't able to get to it for the other demands we have, then, you know, there's an enforcement team, and then we can join up and deal with it from that perspective.
OK, thanks very much indeed. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Paul, we can come to you and we can ask some of your written ones as well. But also, just an additional thing, there were some items, this is just for the committee's benefit here, there were some items on overview and scrutiny management that were very much more questions to the police than scrutiny topics that have been submitted, I believe, to Andrew. But he hasn't had it because he's been in a meeting all day. He hasn't had the chance to review them or anything. So what we'll best be doing for that is just get them back as a written answer. I hope that's OK with you, Andrew, as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
In that regards. So, Paul, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. It was very, very helpful, I think. You mentioned about the 101 number.
Yeah.
I actually had to use it several weeks ago. Yeah. And I tried on 4 occasions to report some antisocial behaviour, which was graffiti being sprayed on street furniture, on fences, walls, and it appeared to be a trail across parts of Winnersh, and it appeared to be done by the same people. It was always black coloured paint, and it was always similar symbols all the time. So I tried the 101 number. But I had to give up after about 40 minutes, and the message kept telling me, if it's not important at that particular time, it's not happening, please use the website. So I tried to use the website, and I went down various channels to try and report this on the website, and I ended up absolutely nowhere, in a cul-de-sac. Yeah. And there was nowhere to actually upload any evidence footage of photos. Yeah. Is there some way that this could be improved?
Yes, is the answer to that, quite frankly. The 101 issue was a really acute a number of summers ago, where, you know, what your story was very much on a regular basis, that people would try and ring us and it would take a good 30-40 minutes to answer. I think the average time now to answer 101, and please don't laugh at me when I say this, the actual average time is around about 4 minutes, if not less than that, and it goes up and down. And it actually trends as well as to the summer months. That increases just purely because of the volume that comes through. Your experience should be an exception nowadays rather than the norm. It was almost the norm a few years back, purely because there was just this unprecedented demand. So I think you've been very unlucky. I've tried to call it myself previously, and I have waited that long, but I had to ring it a couple of weeks ago when I was on my way to work because of a vehicle broken down in the carriageway, and I almost went through within about a minute or so. And that isn't because they know I'm the superintendent in the police. Just it's not inside information. It's purely it was early in the morning. So again, it does depend on when you call, but 40 minutes isn't acceptable, is it? I don't think anybody would agree that's acceptable. You know, they're working very hard, and the average is around, I think, 4. I was trying to get the data before I came into the meeting, but I haven't managed to do it. I might be able to do it in a second and look at the performance data. That's not normally what happens, I have to say. In terms of the online home, so online home is the location you're talking about using the website to report crime. That's been going for a number of years now, so it's getting better, I'll probably say, in terms of how to do it. I've never done it myself here. I've done it in Devon and Cornwall, and my experience was probably very similar to you. It was a bit clunky to begin with, but I think it's improving. The other part of that is, yes, there will be a facility to upload pictures. We're not quite there with it. The work we're doing is based across Hampshire and Thames Valley. There's a collaboration within our contact management centres, and this is working across 2 forces. So it takes a little bit of time to get where it needs to go, because you've got to marry up the 2 different demands of the forces. But ultimately, yes, there will be an opportunity to do that. But it should be what we're trying to achieve with Online Home is very similar to what you do with like your insurance or another website where you're going to put some information in. We're trying to get to that point where it becomes fairly intuitive how you do it. As you say, your experience and I think my own personal one in Devon and Cornwall, it's not quite there yet in terms of what that looks like, but there's work going on all the time around this. So every time, and I don't know if there's a place to give feedback at all on it. But I'll certainly feed that. No, thank you. I can see you saying yeah. I'll feed that back because the person who runs Online Home lives about 300 yards away to my right hand side. So I've got a direct line into him. So I'll have that conversation with him and what your experience was like to see if it can get any better, really. I think it is an improving picture, but it's by no means exactly where it needs to be at this present time. I hope that kind of answers your question and there's not some sort of avoiding it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. A couple of residents also mentioned to me, and this is over the last few months, that they tried 101 and had to wait up to 20 minutes and then gave up. And they did try a couple of times, but they seem to have similar experience to me. They didn't try the website. They took one look at it and thought, no, that wasn't for them. I think it's probably because it's so clunky, and it's just these drop-down boxes. And if you click one, you end up going one direction. You click something else, you go in another direction, but you never get to the bit where you really want it, unless it's specifically on those drop-down boxes. Once you go to other or anything like that, you're into a cul-de-sac.
No, I'll feed that back, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned about partnership working as well on there, and you mentioned about working with the NAG. Do you involve town and parish councils within that sphere?
They can come along as members of the NAG, yeah, absolutely. I think I have not had much experience with it across Boykingham or Bracknell, purely because I've only come back here since November, and I think it's something we just need to look at. What is the NAG? What is its purpose? What does it do? Who do we want to involve in the NAG? I think just the phrase nag, I don't think is a great thing either, is it? I think we need to use a different name, quite frankly. It has all sorts of connotations, doesn't it? But yeah, I think there is absolutely space for those kind of members on those groups. And the whole point of the nag, and I'll roll back to when I used to I introduced neighbourhood policing into Abingdon police areas, Vale of the White Horse, back in the day when it first came out. And it's very much the concept about how the community gets involved in problem solving and working together, because often some of the solutions are people locally doing stuff. A good example, I mentioned it earlier, was Speedwatch. You know, that's a good community-based approach to tackling antisocial speeding. And it's the community mobilising itself. But certainly within the neighbourhood action groups is about an opportunity for that community to talk about the issues that are affecting them locally. They might not be police issues, they might not be council issues, they might be a community issue, and that's the point of those action groups. We would get the neighbourhood out of the way and just call it an ag, maybe an action group. So yeah, absolutely a place. And I think Narendra and I were only talking about this last week around how we might look at revitalising those particular groups.
Thank you. Can I go on to the two questions I submitted previously? I reported instances of cars fully blocking footways where there were no yellow lines, okay, to Thames Valley Police, and it actually forced residents to come off the footway and walk in a very busy B-class road to get around the obstruction. And some of those had pushchairs, and they complained to me about it, and there are some photographs, and I submitted that information to Thames Valley Police, and I didn't receive any feedback. Is this something, you know, to me, it felt like nothing had gone on. I also chased up, but is it something that the police are taking seriously? And what action will you normally take?
Yeah, I mean, it's a neighbourhood issue, isn't it? If people are blocking footways, that's not the thing that should be happening. And there's two things to that. Firstly, my question would be, does there need to be yellow lines there so people can't do that? And look at trying to prevent them doing that just as a visual thing. The second part of that is, you know, I can't answer on that specific case, but my expectation as the area commander would be, if that came into my neighbourhood team, that they would take the report and they would go and speak to whoever's put that report in, identify what the issue is, and then if there is a partnership requirement to do something about it, work with the partnership to do that. But certainly they should be feeding back to whoever's called that in and talking about the issue and seeing what they can do to prevent it. You know, is that someone local doing it? Is it someone just visiting? What does it mean? What's happening? And find out the information about it. So again, difficult for me to say in terms of that specific case. In terms of prioritising it, it has to be prioritised, as you probably appreciate. We only have a certain number of police officers, but these are the kind of things where the neighbourhood team should come into play. You know, PCSOs should be visiting and talking about these kind of issues. So again, as I said earlier, that's the position I want to move us to with the problem solving teams and the geographic teams, where we will have that ability to come and respond to those particular incidents. Even as a starter for 10, it's a phone call. So what is this issue? When does it happen? How does it happen, etc. When does it and where does it happen? So we've got an idea when we might actually come out and have a conversation about it, because we might catch the people doing it. Is it an offence? Yes, it's an offence called obstructing the highway. But again, there's some criteria around that in terms of proving an offence. So you'd probably go down the lines of a fixed penalty notice for an obstruction offence using with the car. But again, there's some criteria around that needs to be satisfied. So yeah, so in terms of are we taking it seriously? It's based on that threat and harm, in all honesty. But I would expect our neighbourhood teams to do something about that in terms of at least a conversation with the person who's called it in.
Yeah, thank you. I expected to have some feedback of what action had been taken. The photographic evidence clearly showed the vehicle, clearly showing it blocking the whole of the footway, and its registration plate was shown. So it was quite clear it was in that position. So that's what I expected to come back, and what action Thames Valley Police had taken. If I move on to my second submitted question from earlier. A resident has provided me some camera footage of at least 5 near misses by motorised vehicles whilst he was riding his bicycle over the last 12 months. Now, he's a very confident cyclist, okay, and he carries a camera on his bike. The footage was passed to Thames Valley Police, but they have not responded to him at all. And he wants to know really what action would have been taken and what's the procedure for Thames Valley follow-up to go back to him.
Yeah. So in terms of the footage, is this that he's had on some sort of helmet camera type thing that he's then uploaded on? Because there's a facility to upload and report those incidents now on the online home section of the website.
The answer to that is yes, it is exactly that. And he's quite a techie, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. So that they wouldn't automatically come to the local area. So they would go into our traffic department, for want of a better word. He would assess it, our roads policing department. They would assess it and then from there decide what to do with that information. And whether there'd be a prosecution or not, and would then contact the person who's called it in. Again, I can't talk about specific the specific case because I don't know the detail about it, and it wouldn't be something that necessarily would come down to the police area, as in the local area here, because of the nature of that offence. So I could take it away and have a look at it and see what that looks like. So essentially, what should happen? The footage will be uploaded. It will go to the department. They'll assess it and make a decision around it, whether it is going to be prosecuted or not. But I would expect some sort of contact back, because otherwise you don't know what's happening, do you, quite frankly? So, you know, if that's not working, then we need to have a look at that as a police service to make sure, you know, someone's gone to the effort of reporting something and it doesn't seem we've done anything, which isn't really on, is it? So if you can pass me specifics around that, I myself would like to find out what's gone on with it, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'll certainly do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Bill, just to let you know, I have seen your hand, but Clive, fire away.
I want to go back to page 5, please, Andy, and the increase in rape crimes. There's obviously been quite a change of emphasis across all of the police forces, and I think it's pleasing to hear that we're going to be taking it more seriously. Do you think that is going to be a long-term thing? Or is it just short-term for the next 6 months and then goes quiet, goes back to normal again? Still lack of confidence in the justice system, taking too long to get through the system. Victims believing that they're not being listened to properly and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, sorry for cutting in there. Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a long-term thing. I think when you actually look at the statistics around rape, they are starting to increase. I know that doesn't say that there, but overall across the country, we're starting to see an increase, but it's a slow increase. And part of the reason behind that is putting things in place that are long-term and not short-term measures. So part of this is in Thames Valley, and I think across the country, we've got someone who is a superintendent who is now dedicated to rape and sexual offence and leading the work that's happening across the force. That's a superintendent rank. So that person then is pulling the strategy together around how this is going to improve. There's a lot of work happening between the Criminal Justice Department and the CPS in terms of how victims are treated. And it's not just about victims, it's also about witnesses for these particular cases. And linked into that is how the courts proceed with this, with the trials, getting the trials into the courts a lot earlier than they currently do. Because again, you know, if someone's waiting 700 days, that's over 2 years for their court, they're not going to be engaged in it. They're going to disengage. So there's a whole system, you choose that phrase again, a whole system review about how we do the investigation, then the management through the court system, the CJ system, so people feel like they're getting justice. And there's all sorts of measures now that can come in place to victims about how they give evidence. They can give it before they go to court sometimes if the criteria is there, so they don't have to stand in front of that kind of offender. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a step change really in terms of having to put a light on exactly what we're doing within policing when it comes to sexual offending, and very much the hopefully when you see the strategy, it will give you confidence. This isn't just about 1 year, 2 year. This is a long-term approach to changing how we deal with it. And that it's not just about how we as a criminal justice system or organisation do it. It's actually about how we change the attitude of people, young men, adults, or young people, adults around the whole world of sexual offending, because it starts with the culture of our society, and again, making this unacceptable and it's not the thing you do. If we start at that point as well, which again is even longer term, then actually that will help reduce the number of people that fall victim to these hideous crimes. So yeah, it is a step change and a long-term thing that is going on.
Okay, thanks very much. And you've also highlighted knife crime in schools. So are you having much success in persuading teenagers that they don't need to be carrying a knife, that it isn't for their own security, and it is only if you're carrying a knife, you're in danger of losing it, you're in danger of taking somebody's life, you're in danger then of being in prison for a long time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's lots of work that's going on around schools program and diversion. When you look at the work that's happening within the violence reduction unit, that hopefully everybody understands, I can talk about it a little bit more if needed. But essentially, that whole violence reduction unit has got people from education, health, the police, social care, all working together around identifying people who may be at risk of carrying knives, maybe at risk of harm from knives, as well as those longer term pieces of work through the educational system around why it's not a wise thing to have a knife with you, how to keep yourself safe, the issues if you do have a knife, often it then gets turned on you, and then just doing that piece of work to prevent early intervention and prevention, essentially, to stop people actually carrying knives and bring them. There's lots of engagement taking place with the schools, probably more to be done. Certainly from a Wokingham Borough perspective, we have a serious violence partnership meeting that's currently working out the cohort of people that we may work with. That's from 0 to the age of 25. That's essentially covers the serious violence duty, but we're looking at wider than just 25. It's around knife crime in general, and that piece of work is taking place at the moment. And again, around that table within that group is the schools, is health, is commissioning and health commissioning, it is the police, it is the local authority involved, if I can use the pun there, please. So there's a whole group of people within the violence reduction partnership that are working towards these as part of the key aims of that group.
Okay, so if you're a 14, 15, 16-year-old at school in Wokingham, how often will you have somebody from Thames Valley Police or from any other agency come in to talk to you about not carrying a knife?
I don't know the specifics of that, I have to be honest, but there are programs around that, and I can take that away and inform you what they look like. I don't know exactly. Narinda may have more detail on that. She's probably been working on it longer than I have. Narinda.
Yeah, I can say so. Systematically, we're ensuring that at least once a year there is throughout the year a programme for each year group where general information about knife crime and really actually quite hard-hitting, powerful testimonial work from ex-gang members and people with a lot more credibility than than myself, basically going along and having a chat about the consequences of carrying knives, what's occurred with them, and what can seriously occur, and also some of that myth busting as well. There's also then ongoing work with parents as well about what to look out for and how to sort of protect and safeguard their own children, where they might identify or realise that their particular children might be at risk or in an at-risk group as well. So there's some work going on around that. in addition to that, we've also got currently at the moment a serious violence exploitation, which is basically a knife crime survey that's gone out to borough-wide to all residents and also specifically to schools. So again, really building on that credibility picture, getting some information back from actual young people that are involved and have some life experience of what's going on the ground to tell us what their experience is of knives, guns, gangs, exploitation, what they feel the issues are in Wokingham for us, because there's what we know, there's what we think we know, and there's actually probably what's actually really going on out there. So we're trying to collect that information anonymously as well from feedback generally from those people, young people, and from residents and parents and anybody who's got something to tell us that we need to then bring back as a picture and then build a model and build a service delivery out from that picture and that consultation. So there is quite a bit of work going on in partnership both with ourselves, the Youth Offending Service and our early years team with Children's Services around, real prevention work, because the key thing to add about this in Wokingham is that we don't have large numbers of these concerns, so we haven't got a lot of young people that we're concerned about in terms of numbers. But what we have got is a real we've got a real job with early intervention and prevention, like Andy was saying before, in terms of really focusing on the early intervention and prevention, so really making sure that Wokingham maintains that real safe and low numbers picture that we've got at the moment. So that's where we're sort of with that piece of work.
Thanks. Ask another question? Yep. So you said that you introduced neighbourhood policing in Abingdon, Andy, which is great. But are we moving away from that in Early and Swallowfield and Shinfield and Malverfield? Are we moving away from neighbourhood policing because we've changed the number of officers? And do you want to tell us what's been happening recently?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The answer to that is no, we're not moving away from neighbourhood policing. In fact, the work I've just done for the last year on secondment is about introducing the College of Policing guidelines around neighbourhood policing. That's in response to, they came out towards the end of 2019, and also in response to our own internal audits around neighbourhood policing and what we're trying to achieve, including problem solving within that. But what we didn't have across the police area here was a really identified problem solving approach to neighbourhood policing. It was very generic. It was, oh, you're a neighbourhood officer, so you do problem solving. It really wasn't very good in that sense. So what's happened on the police area is there's been a review around our resourcing in terms of how we divide that up. So now we've got neighbourhood officers that are geographically based, and we've got neighbourhood officers that are problem solving based. They all do problem solving. It's not exclusive to the problem solving team, but it's split where we've got a group that can spend more time on the more complex, the more difficult problem solving issues. And then we've got our geographic teams that are your named officer, if you like, on your area, alongside the PCSOs. So the PCSOs play a really important part in neighbourhood policing as well, around engagement and being within that community. Have we got it right yet? No, we haven't, because it's early stages, and we've got to develop it a little bit more in terms of making sure people know who their neighbourhood officers are. There's some work going on at the moment, hopefully will come soon to the website, which will allow direct access into the neighbourhood teams. Because at the minute it can be, sometimes you can go to 101 or spend 40 minutes like Paul is doing, getting frustrated and not get anywhere with it. Well, this will give you the opportunity to email into, it's kind of email indirect, but you enter in, you fill out like an inquiry form at an organisation, and it goes then to the right person. I'm clunkily describing it, but essentially that you can do an online inquiry, if you like, or and it will go directly into the team, which will hopefully improve that communication as well. So you don't get stuck in this turmoil that some of you feel happens with the 101 number and email addresses. So that will improve how we do that. But in summary to that, no, neighbourhood policing is still here. It's still developing as a new team, so give it that chance to embed, really, I would suggest. There's some new concepts around how we do our problem solving with that dedicated team. But yeah, no, it's still there for the community, definitely.
Has there been a reduction in frontline officers?
No, exactly the same number. Yeah, exactly the same number. Across both areas, there's 27 neighbourhood officers, and that's split pretty much down the middle. I think there's 14 in Bracknell and 13 in Wokingham, if I'm correct in saying that. And then when it comes to PCSOs, I've got it here somewhere, bear with me. I think it was, I can't find it here now. PCSOs, forgive me. PCs, tasking, resolution. I think it was 14 off the top of my head, or am I going over the top there? I can't see it on my list here of people, so forgive me. But no, we have dedicated PCSOs to the areas. Forgive me, I can't find it on here for the minute.
Okay, so we haven't had a reduction, but we haven't had an increase either.
No.
I think there's been various headlines over the last 12 months saying that we should be having more policemen in Thames Valley. I think it was we were recruiting over 100, but none of them are coming to Wokingham.
No, bear with me. So with that, obviously you're aware of the uplift programme that's taking place nationally, the Boris 20,000 as it's colloquially called by some people. So in year one of that, there was 183 officers that came into Thames Valley across ICR, so incident and crime response, and that was split across the police areas. In year two, there were 21 detectives that came into local police areas. And then year three, which is this coming year, there's going to be another 60 officers coming. Now, we don't know where they're going yet because it's year three. There's some requests that they do come to the likes of bolstering neighbourhood policing, etc. But I'm not the person who makes that decision, sadly. I'd certainly be doing that if I could. So that bit of work is happening at the moment in terms of where those officers are going. But ultimately what that means, so that year one, we had 183 more come into response policing. What that means, there's less call for neighbourhood policing to cover that response side. So when there's gaps in policing, etc., that frontline cover, the place that we go to is neighbourhood policing. That should become less and less in terms of those numbers come up. In the next year, there's going to be some pressure because in that final year, the new degree entry programme for police officers mean they have to have some protected learning time as part of their degree. So again, for the next year or so, there's going to be some pressures in using the other elements of policing, such as neighbourhood police and the tasking team, to cover some of those shortfalls. I think, you know, we all agree with the position we can't be in, that if someone dials 999, no one turns up. So just for this period of time, there's going to be a little bit of pressure that comes for neighbourhood policing just around providing that initial frontline support. But the side that coming out of that side, we'll see an increase in the number of officers we've got on the police areas across the Thames Valley, and that will include Wokingham. How that's divided up, I don't know yet, because it's in the early stages of those discussions around it.
So what you've just said is roughly the first 200 that have come into Thames Valley, we haven't really had them here in Wokingham, unless some of the 21 detectives have had a few cases around Wokingham. So hopefully there'll be some more with the next 60.
So of those 183 ICR officers, some of them will absolutely have gone into our police area in terms of Wokingham, Bracknell and Wokingham. And that's the same with the detectives. What we do have now, we've had a reshape of the force. We now have dedicated detectives on the police area. We never had that before. We were covered by Reading. We now have them at Loddon Valley. So we do have dedicated officers in the borough. And again, hopefully with the 60 or so that are coming to frontline policing, local policing it's called, I would expect some of them to come into Wokingham and Bracknell. So Bracknell and Wokingham, the police area. So yes, they will be coming this way.
Okay.
Andrew, just to interject here, because you said something there that just sparked my interest. You indicated that of these new officers coming on board, as it were, there is education time. That's basically them, I assume, studying a degree. whilst basically on the job. So it's effectively a graduate program, but effectively it's an apprenticeship scheme that they're getting a degree out of at the end. Is that correct? Am I understanding that process correctly?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the language because purely it's not my area of expertise. It's called the degree entry program. So yeah, if that's what it relates to in that language, and absolutely, yeah. So part of that is they get trained as police officers. They then, as part of that, will be studying for a degree. And part of the requirement from the university is their protected learning time, where they're taken away from frontline policing and they do academic work as part of that degree.
Okay, so it is a proper what I refer to as an apprenticeship scheme. Just
so forgive me, probably my lack of knowledge exactly what that language looks like.
Yeah. There's various different varieties. Yeah. That makes sense, because the one thing that suddenly concerned me is what you needed a degree to join the police force anymore. That doesn't feel right to me, because I fundamentally disagree in those sorts of things. Because 9 times out of 10, your best workers are people who've gone through and learned on the job as apprentices. But that's just my personal opinion. One more, Clive, and then I'm going to Shirley.
Okay. Several years ago, we had Wokingham Town Police Station close. Is there any chance that this could open as or be opened up again as a tri-service station? Because we've had a few of those around West Berkshire, and I think they've been reasonably successful. What's the chances of that happening?
To be honest, in answering that, I don't know, because the estate strategy is not something I get involved in. But if I was completely honest, probably very low, because it was closed. It was part of our estate strategy around reducing the amount of money we're spending on estate. When our constriction of money, the 200 million we had to save as a police service. So it's unlikely. But never say never is probably what I'll say. You know, if money changes in terms of the budgets change, that could be an option. I wouldn't say it'd happen in the next 3 or 4 years or anything like that, but I would hope in some time in the future, as budgets change and they may increase, their opportunities around tri-service and things like that are really quite important, that we try and achieve those. I know some in Hampshire they've done it, and as you say, within Thames Valley itself it's taken place. But I think in terms of this LPA at the moment, we've got the 2 locations which are the main bases, which is Loddon Valley and Bracknell. And there's a few touchdown places within different areas, but they're very few and far between, in all honesty. And it's very much around money, if I'm being blatantly honest, and trying to save some money.
Okay. Shirley.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. What I'm interested in is schools interventions, and you've talked a lot about knife crime, and it's obviously very, very important. It's very high up on the agenda, I'm sure. In these sessions that we've had in previous years, we've talked quite a lot about prevention, and one of the things that I seem to recall from last year was that I think there was a plan to go into schools and work with social workers and teachers to identify children who were possibly at risk of being recruited into county lines operations and to do drug running and that type of thing. Yeah. And I just wondered whether that had sort of slightly fallen by the wayside with the focus on knife crime.
I think knife crime is unfortunately part of CDL and county drugs lines. It is kind of how they do their business, their modus operandi, if you like. So certainly probably the focus has probably moved around into knife crime, but part of it is, and I think a very good point Narinda makes, you know, a lot of the work we're doing now through the schools is with people who've been through that experience. It's not someone like me as a police officer going in, wagging a finger saying, don't do it, you shouldn't do it, because it doesn't work. You know, that's the bottom line of that. It doesn't have the impact it needs to. It needs to come from people that have been there and done it and have come out the other side and explained the issues and dramas and strife and grief that it causes to get involved in that kind of world. I think alongside that is some work that's happening through actually the violence reduction group or unit, which is around PC Bob. Now, this is a very at the younger years of the schools to, again, start at a very early age around kind of the things that you don't want to be doing, trust and confidence within the police, and working then through the different age ranges within the school around different age-related interventions to keep people safe. So I think there's a bit of work we're also doing, and part of that, I'm speaking to, forgive me, I can't remember the gentleman before, but part of that uplift programme, again, there's some work around asking for some schools officers in that, so that we can have some dedicated schools officers, and it's their task to do that work because we see the importance of it. And again, it's around with the opportunity we have with this uplift of officers. I think it's around 600 for Thames Valley in total, but don't please quote me on that because I'm not sure that's completely accurate. But that's the number I have in my head. You know, it's around how we use the opportunity with that. I know we've got a rural crime team now because of the uplift of policing. But I think it's the opportunities we have now around that. So, you know, the point you make around has the focus changed? It has probably to a little bit a degree, but it's still focused around those county drug lines. But again, if we get that uplift in officers, and that's something that very much will be part of that programme. Our officers now do it anyway, but actually having dedicated officers do it will probably reap more benefits because we'll have people that can do it full time rather than as part of their general role within neighbourhood policing.
Thank you. And would that start at sort of I don't know, year 5, year 6 at primary school, going in at that kind of level of intervention? Because you know we know that children as sort of young as 9 and 10 you know, get recruited into these sucked into these kind of things.
Yes, the answer to that simply. It even starts at nursery level as well, where there's some work that happens with the likes of PCSOs and stuff like that. So yeah, it starts through all the age ranges. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yes, the PCSOs were in with my daughter a few weeks ago, and so she's only 5. So yeah, it is all ages. Does anyone else have any further questions? Indicate now. Bill, do you want to speak your piece as you've had your hand up patiently this whole time?
Yeah, thank you. I realise I'm not part of the committee, so therefore my pecking order comes pretty low. But thanks very much, Guy, for that. Last night at our executive meeting, we gained approval to enter into a consultation to introduce a public sector protection order. And this has really come about because of the car meets that a lot of our residents have suffered throughout the borough. How do you see the police working with our enforcement officers, bearing in mind that, you know, these guys could be faced with quite large groups where they're trying to issue a fixed penalty notice and suddenly come confronted with this large group? How do you see the police working with our officers to sort of solve this problem?
Yeah, no, I mean, specifically, I'll talk generally and then specifically probably about car meets then. So I think there's a real opportunity for us joint patrolling. You know, I don't see why that couldn't happen. I think, you know, the stuff I talked about around getting to understand that whole idea of problem solving together. The stuff I said around CSAS, those opportunity to accredit around being able to give out a bigger range of tickets if it was done through the chief constable given that authority to do so. And then I think what I want to try and achieve with the team is that they become part of the daily patrol, the daily business, you know, that our neighbourhood teams come into the office, that they can come into the police station, whatever that looks like, just around that enforcement bit, because that's where the power comes, isn't it? In terms of the power of that joint enterprise in terms of a partnership. So, you know, they can't be played off against each other. I think in terms specifically around issuing tickets, always a point of confrontation. It's a point of confrontation for us. You know, it's no different. And again, you know, part of that training around giving tickets would be about that kind of personal safety element, how you do it. You know, I wouldn't give a ticket to a massive group of people unless I wanted to end up on the wrong side of them in terms of turning on me. You know, there's ways and techniques that will be taught around how you would actually do that. In terms of the car meets bit, certainly, you know, we've done some joint work around operations with roads policing, operations with the neighbourhood teams. And I think that the whole issue, what you can't do, to give it a term, you can't arrest your way out of it. It doesn't work because they just keep moving around to a different place. You've got to look at that place-based kind of crime reduction to tackle it, which is what the borough has been doing. And that's not all about the council spending money. That's about landlords as well and their social responsibility that goes with it also. I hope that answers your question, Bill.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. most of my questions have already been asked, but one more final thing, and then I think we will let the superintendent go for the evening, as he appears to have had a very long day, and that is the cybercrime and the fraud aspect.
Yes.
On this regard. Now, I know that this was traditionally the purview of the City of London Police, especially in regards to the fraud aspect, given its much more fiscal and global orientation. But how are we able to basically spool that down from that national led organization in the city down to local policing areas? Because at the end of the day, it is individuals that are most impacted by this rather than the banking entities as well, although they have to bear the cost of it if there is a incident. But we do need to actually get it much more locally down. So how's that being done?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So action fraud is where people now would report fraud. Action fraud, a group of investigators that will take all the information, assess that, and if there's then the likelihood of prosecution, it will then come back into the police at a local level to take that action. So we don't as a police service take those reports of fraud. It goes through action fraud. I think there's a skills gap within policing in terms of how we investigate fraud. Frauds are, by the nature of you already described, they're not simple things, they're complex things. So again, there's some work that we need to do around upskilling staff around this. We have an economic crime unit, and there's more contact with the economic crime unit than, so the economic crime unit will tackle that serious fraud, that organised criminality, the stuff you talk about that the City of London would do. That's what would happen on a Thames Valley basis. And there's much more work that goes on when somebody gets a fraud case. Those conversations now tend to take place around, what do I do with this? What's the best way of approaching this? And I think the other element of it is how we keep people safe and avoid becoming victims of fraud. I know some cyber fraud is very difficult to prevent, but again, I think there's work that certainly can be done through the partnership around this. We have something called op signature within the police, where if someone is vulnerable through age, through mental health, for whatever reason we deem there's a vulnerability there, op signature is we will contact them within 24 hours and go and see them, and then put that crime prevention advice and support in place around them not becoming victims of fraud again. So kind of two elements to that really around it. And I think the other part is, as an organisation, we recognise the changing criminality that happens online. We now have dedicated digital investigators that can provide that tactical advice, or take on the investigation themselves to help with that whole world of online, which to most police officers is very difficult to get their heads around. Because of all the requirements around data protection, around addresses, IP addresses for internet, all that kind of complexity that sits within digital investigation. We now have dedicated officers in policing now to help with that. And I think over time, we will see that just get bigger and bigger.
It will get bigger and bigger. Because from my background perspective, I work in cybersecurity at a reasonably high level now, and I'm to be perfectly frank, I'm over the moon to hear the fact there is digital investigators now, because anyone who has been watching social media in regards to what has happened in Ukraine, you have seen the people in my line of work and in open source intelligence going completely ham over tongs and actually showing people how you can find this information with metadata, with imprints deep within the technology that is being done. So it is completely possible to track people who are doing these digital crimes unless they really know what they're doing. And those are few and far between. But the issues that neighborhood policing would be dealing with, which is much more abuse and minor fraud and sexual harassment aspects, that is hopefully something that the digital investigation team will be able to deal with in a much greater detail going forward. So that is very good, because that was what I was going to be asking, if those were included in the recruitment statistics. So that's already done and dusted.
Yeah, that team's already there.
Good. Okay. Well, Superintendent, I think it's, well, we've been going on with this for over an hour. One more question, Clive, and then, oh, what? Another 6.
Andrew has had those questions for him to reply by email or something like that.
Yeah, if that would be great. If we could get those written and circulated back through to the committee.
Otherwise, we'll be here talking to him for another half hour.
Yeah, and I'm conscious we've got other external guests this evening as well.
Because he gives such full answers.
I won't do that again then, Clive.
You need to be talking to a barrister then on how to give a correct answer to a question. What's the time? Sorry, let me rephrase that question. Do you know the time? So, Andrew, thank you very much for this evening. Please do circulate those questions. Have you sent them directly? Okay. Has Callum got a copy? Yeah. Okay. If we can get those questions together with the ones that I mentioned earlier, written answers, that would be much appreciated. Yeah, but Andrew, thank you very much for your time. And now I need to wake up Group Manager David Crease of Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue to begin his part of the presentation. So, Andrew, thank you very much. Have a very good evening.
Thank you. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
David, pleasure to meet you.
And you, thanks very much for inviting me.
Okay, well, the floor is yours, as it were, virtually.
I also have a presentation to share. I'm starting to feel in the pressure a little bit, as Andrew seamlessly managed to whip that presentation up and share that. So I'll do my best, if you bear with me. If you could just give me a thumbs up or
you're good.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks very much for inviting me along this evening. My name is Dave Crease. I'm the group manager, or the hub manager, that's responsible for Wokingham Borough and Bracknell Forest in terms of prevention, protection and response activities for Berkshire Fire and Rescue. Similarly to Andrew, I've got a presentation to go through, which I think you should have all had sight of before this evening. Just identifying some key issues in terms of where we've come from over the sort of last couple of years, financial pressures, etc., and certainly what we're looking forward to in the year ahead. More importantly. So I'll run through this and then hopefully there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. But a couple of areas that I'm going to cover or look to cover is just a brief run through of our financial position, and I'm by no means the expert when it comes to the finances of the fire service. But I think what it does is it just gives a little bit of context around some of the decisions we've made in terms of our assets and station openings and closures, etc. So it just puts that in perspective for us. Our target savings updates as we move forward. Our strategic asset investment framework, so what we're looking to do in terms of our vehicles going forward, looking at new technology and how we can make some savings there. Our integrated risk management programme, very little to be sort of said on that. We're coming to the end of our current cycle, so this year is a planning year, so we'll just touch on that, and there's a slight name change as well. But I think it's important because it is something that's going to come out to public consultation this year as well. So it's something certainly to be aware of. The Built Environment Programme, which was instigated following the Grenfell Tower fire in terms of the 46 recommendations for fire and rescue services. So just a little bit of an overview as where we are as a service and the progress we've made against those. And then a little bit of our intent for the year ahead in terms of our prevention, response and protection activity. So our current financial position, our 22-23 budget is just shy of 38.5 million. So between 2010 and 2016, we saved 4.96 from our budget. And between April 16 and 22, we've delivered a further 2.4 million as well. So we've managed to do that through successfully appealing some business rate changes on a number of our properties. I'm just going to pop that to the next slide. There we go. Some business rate changes from some of our properties, which will produce a saving of 77,000 off the base budget. The sale of our D Road site that some of you may be aware of, and the move across to Thiel station, which is one of our tri-service stations, and that will make the management of the estate far more efficient, reducing running costs significantly by about £55,000. The authority are currently generating some higher levels across cross-border income, so an extra 35,000 of income will be built into the budget for 22-23. And then finally, the investment in the fleet is resulting in lower maintenance costs, and the budget will be reduced again by about 10,000 off the back of that. So previous savings leading up to that is following a restructure of the service support functions and a move to a local hub delivery model. So at the start of the presentation, I introduced myself as the central hub manager. Essentially, we split the service Royal Berkshire into three. So we have an east, west and a central hub. And then the prevention and protection and response activity is managed at a more local level. So it's more specific to the local communities, essentially, is the idea behind that. And we become a little bit more efficient in what we do. And that was a 1.1 million saving, which was delivered in 2017. The disestablishment of the retained support unit was 425,000 savings, and that was in 2018. Basically, off the back of the hub model being implemented, that retained support unit was no longer needed because they could be managed and supported at a much local level. And then the introduction of our new remotely managed station model and the FDO review, which is the most recent one, which has saved about half a million. And then obviously the closure of Wargrave Station with some savings of 168 in 2020, and the closure of Pangbourne and the opening of Thiel Station, as I mentioned earlier. So the strategic asset investment framework. So we've got our first new tri-service community station opened in Hungerford in 2017. All of our new stations have a very similar sort of look and feel, as you can see in some of the pictures there. Our second tri-service community station opened in Crowthorne, which is probably the closest one that some of you may well be familiar with. And the third one has recently opened last year in Thiel in the autumn. We've also invested in 19 new generation Volvo appliances, which have been delivered since in a phased approach since 2017. And this was a joint procurement project across the Thames Valley, which essentially saw some savings in that joint procurement process. We've also purchased a new 53-metre aerial ladder platform, which became fully operational in 21, and that's based at Whitley Wood. And we've got a capital investment up to 25-26 finance with the medium-term financial plan. So the fleet program of work deals with our white fleet rationalisation and will cost us 246,000. It involves the disposal of 9 vehicles, which are all over 10 years old now, and purchasing 3 hybrid vehicles, 3 electric vehicles, and then 3 operational support vans, which rationalises the fleet to generate a revenue saving of approximately £23,000 over 3 years. The ICT programme of work will cost us 891,000, and the focus will be twofold. Firstly, there will be a refresh of the operational communications equipment in preparation for full emergency service network deployment. And secondly, more capability will be enhanced and expanded across the organisation to allow a greater use of mobile applications with associated benefits. And what I mean by that is the use of iPads and digital technology to go out and do risk visits and gather information is far more efficient and quick for us to do that. So touched on at the start, the corporate plan and the IRMP. This essentially sets out what the fire authority is planning over the next 5 years. It's that identification of risk and how we plan to meet the needs of that foreseeable or perceived risk. Basically, it balances our resources and contains information on what we're going to do, and that filters through annually through annual plans. So annual plans will be presented and published as a public document and made available for people to see in terms of how we plan to meet that on a short-term basis. We're currently in a planning year at the moment, so we're looking at that. We're doing that risk analysis for the next CRMP. So that's a NFCC change, the National Fire Chiefs Council. We're changing it to a corporate risk management, community risk management plan, beg your pardon, rather than an integrated risk management plan. But following that risk analysis this year, we will be going out to public consultation, which then essentially gives the local communities the opportunity to feedback on what it is we plan to do and the perceived risk as we see it over the 5-year period. So the Built Environment Programme. The Built Environment Programme was set up following the publication of the Grenfell Tower Phase 1 inquiry report, which came out in October 2019. The report included 46 recommendations for fire and rescue services, local authorities, and the responsible persons for premises, aimed at preventing a similar tragedy to the one which occurred at Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June, where tragically 72 people lost their lives. So off the back of that, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service implemented the Built Environment Programme to address those 46 recommendations. And we split it up into 4 work streams: operations from tactics and equipment, operations in call management, so how we manage those calls in Thames Valley Fire Control Service, risk information, and a high-rise residential building project. The high-rise residential building project, essentially, it was a team of skilled protection officers that went round and did a risk visits to all of our high-rise residential buildings within Berkshire. So just a bit of an update on the progress on those areas, really. So the operational tactics and equipment. As a service, we've purchased fire escape hoods and delivered training to all operational staff. And essentially, the fire escape hoods allow a degree of protection to evacuate people from smoky environments for a short period of time. We have a standardised radio test procedure which has been developed now to help us identify buildings or areas where radios don't function optimally. So then we can identify these areas, and as part of our risk plan in attendance, we can implement different radio and communication procedures to address that. And service delivery managers have delivered theoretical and practical high-rise trainings for crews. So we have a combination of our training, which is an in-house learning management system, but there's also been an element of face-to-face and operational practical training as well. So it's a combined approach, really, to achieve the learning and the recommendations that have been put forward. We also address policies and procedures to ensure that we align to national operational guidance, which gives a degree of standardisation across the sector in how we address high-rise fires. And then also that addresses some of the information flow from Thames Valley Fire Control to the incident ground. I think there was lots of scrutiny around the fire survival guidance that came from control, not just from Grenfell Tower, but previous high-rise fires before, and how that filtered through the control points and call takers into the incident ground to be able to deal with those evacuation and make those rescues. So there's been a lot of work around how we address that going forward. And we've also developed evacuation training through our internal learning management system, and training around external wall systems as well, and how to recognise the differences in the fire spread, etc. So from our core management system, I've probably touched on some of that already, but again, aligning to national operational guidance, so we get a standardised approach across services, which allows us to support other services as well, because we have aligned procedures. We've installed Airwave software, which will enable our control to share information with assisting control rooms during large and complex incidents. And this will also improve the multi-agency working and information sharing approach as well to significant or major incidents. We have a fire survival guidance policy, which provides standard procedure for control room operators to support building occupiers who are trapped or in need of rescue, and then filtering that through to the fire ground. So there's a really nice link that's coming through our control service onto the fire ground, and a managed system in place as to how we would deal with that. So the risk information, we've developed and delivered initial guidance on our site-specific risk information, how we go about gathering that information, through to what it is we want to know. You know, what is the key stuff that's really important that jumps out at us when we go to these buildings, and also how do we then gather that data and share it appropriately. Part of that is we've designed and delivered electronic premises information plates, EPIPs, for all of our high-rise residential buildings that are currently within interim measures, with a view to expanding this across all high-rise buildings. So out of all the inspections that we did, some of those high-rises are currently in interim measures. So to support us and add another layer of safety, I suppose, you know, in terms of response to those buildings, these EPIPs, they're electronic, they come up on the data terminal on the fire appliance, and they just give us a much greater degree of information, which then gives us an indication in terms of, or prompts an alternative evacuation strategy potentially. And then the high-rise team, as I mentioned earlier, they've now inspected all 198 high-rise residential buildings within Berkshire. 24 of those have been placed into interim measures, meaning the buildings are no longer able to support a stay-put evacuation strategy. So that may be whether there's some compartmentation issues, fire alarm detection issues, and they've had to put some other measures in place, such as a waking watch to support a simultaneous evacuation. And we also have 18 enforcement notices as well, which have been issued, which is requiring the responsible person to make some significant changes or alterations. So prevention proposals for 2020 to 23. So we're currently at a stage, new financial year, releasing our local safety plans, which each unitary has its own local safety plan in terms of how we intend to address prevention, protection and response activities within the local area. Noting that each local area has its own nuances, demographic challenges, etc. So it's important that we don't just have a generic document for each unitary, and we do break it down and use the local knowledge of crews and the intelligence of our local teams to address a suitable response. At the heart of all activities, not just prevention activity, is our equality of access. So essentially, you know, what we want to make sure that it's in line with our EDI objectives internally and externally, and with the NFCC published documents around equality of access, making sure that all our services that we offer the members of the community and the public and employment opportunities are equal to everybody, and accessible, and particularly from people from underrepresented groups. This year we'll be introducing a safe and well follow-up programme for the most vulnerable people. So previously we would go out, we would do a safe and well, we'd make people safe in the home by providing smoke alarms, maybe a death alarm if required, you know, a really bespoke service. And then once we'd done that, we would leave, and then potentially wouldn't go back to do that revisit and check if the circumstances have changed in a year or two or not. We've recognised there's probably a need to start doing that, in fact, and that's quite important to understand that those circumstances do change in fairly short time. So this year we're introducing a follow-up programme so that we can maintain that contact over time and make sure that the service we're providing is appropriate and continues to be for all the residents. We want to enhance the quality and the quantity of the referrals received through our Adults at Risk programme. So ideally, all of our safe and well visits would come from referrals from partner agencies. We would work from partner agencies. We know they're out in the community, whether it's adult social care, PCSOs, ambulance. That we know they're out in the community, engaging with people that are vulnerable, and we train them to identify that and then refer them to us to make sure that they're getting a suitable and the right service to make them safer in their homes, essentially. So by increasing the quantity of those, then clearly we're making sure that we're visiting the most vulnerable. So we're targeting the right people within the community and delivering the service in the right place. And then maintaining the quality is just making sure that we're confident and assured that we are going to the right areas. And there's a quality assurance process for our delivery teams as well, around how we're performing. As part of our overall road safety strategy, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue intends to target prevention activities towards motorcyclists. To help improve motorcyclist safety, we'll continue to support delivery of Biker Down and facilitate Be a Better Biker courses in our community space on fire stations. The Biker Down course very much focuses, there's two aspects, I suppose, with these courses, and the Biker Down focuses on teaching bikers or training bikers around the first aid and how to deal if they come across a motorcycle accident. And then the Be a Better Biker course is very much like an advanced driving course. It's just developing those skills further than what they would have got from their initial biker license courses. And we've started to run those across a number of our stations. And then obviously there's our school activity. There's a real keen focus with Year 7 students with a tailored fire safety and road safety presentation to tackle any potential risk around that. That's been measured of a bit of a hybrid. We offer two opportunities there. We're happy to go into schools and speak to the young people, but there's also a remote package that we can send in that schools can use and fit into their curriculum as they see fit. So we offer both, and it just depends on the school and what their preferred method. And some we've done both as well. Hub managers, we're also involved in the delivery of Safe Drive Stay Alive, which is a road safety programme concentrated on new and prospective drivers around the ages of 15 to 17. And very much like Andrew was talking about around the knife crime earlier, it's really key to understand how we get the messages across. What do we need to do to get the right message across to young people? The importance of road safety as they're approaching their driving licence and getting out on the road by themselves. And the Safe Drive Stay Alive campaign very much focuses around people who have been involved in accidents or responded as a responder, or have very much been affected by being involved or having loved ones involved in serious accidents. And it's a really hard-hitting programme, but really effective in getting that message across to young people. And I think there's 30,000 young people across the Thames Valley are reached by this initiative every year. So something to be quite proud of. I think it's quite a successful programme, that one. Our prevention teams will continue to support the UK drowning prevention strategy as well, and water safety partnerships. There's a number of water safety partnerships popping up around the Berkshire area, and there is one being introduced in Wokingham this year. We know there's a certain area around the Sonning Bridge where we have people entering the water and the Thames. So that is a real area of focus for us this year, in working with our partners to try and reduce that, look at what we can do to stop that happening, because we know it's, water deaths nationally are becoming a far more significant issue for fire and rescue services to look at and deal with. And finally, we're looking at our cadets, introducing a cadets scheme in Wokingham. It's the only unitary at the moment that doesn't have a fire cadet scheme. So it's something I'm really passionate about introducing this year to make sure that is no longer the case come the end of the year. And it's a really successful programme in engaging with young people, talk about how we get the message across to young people around certain prevention campaigns. And this is just a really good opportunity to ask them what it is that, you know, that would appeal to them in terms of how we deliver those messages. And we work alongside them. And actually, just recently, our Fire Cadets campaign have done a video for us around one of our consultation processes, just to perhaps attract a different demographic, different audience that we would normally have responding to our consultations. And you know, that's really evolving quite nicely, and I want that to be a part of Wokingham. Our response proposals, although prevention is our absolute priority, we do recognise that fires and other incidents like road traffic collisions occur and require a swift and effective response. Our approach to emergency response is to ensure we have the right number of firefighters, the right fire engines at the right place and at the right times, delivering the right standard of response. That's essentially, you know, if we go back to the IRMP or CRMP I spoke about earlier, that's essentially what that is all about, ensuring that that is the case, and we manage that as best as possible. Last year, we were planning to undertake a review of our specialist water rescue capability to ensure it's aligned with local risks and national operational guidance. That has now been pushed into this year, so it's in this year's proposal. Due to capacity issues and around COVID and all sorts. So that's something we're looking to do this year. However, we are still part of the DEFRA national response. So we are externally audited from DEFRA in terms of the service we do provide, and we're available for national recall should that be required. We're also looking at a review of our incident support capability. And ensure it becomes aligned to our risks and reflects national best practice. And that's more about our command units that come and support incidents. Can we improve our technology on those and how we support incidents as best as possible to capture some of the information that we need? I think there's quite a bit of work to move forward with that, and that's quite an exciting project to be a part of. We're just about to introduce 18 new members of operational staff through National Apprenticeship Scheme. So there's this is the first lot of apprentices that are coming into Royal Berkshire. They've just finished their training service at the Fire Service College, finishing up some training at our training centre in Whitley Wood, and will be out on stations the latter part of April. So this is part of a blended approach in terms of recruitment. So we also had a transferee process running at a similar time. So we're getting that blend of new talent coming into the organisation and also experience as well. And we're just coming out of COVID. We're now sort of in a position to get back into our multi-agency exercising, working better with our partners in terms of our ops preparedness, I suppose. Enhancing our response, which is aligned to national operational guidance. So we're out there. We know our significant risks across Berkshire, and we want to start making sure that our crews are out familiarising themselves with those risks, and we're working with our partners to understand and make sure that we are delivering the best operational response should that be required at any one of those sites. And protection proposals. So we're currently developing a risk-based inspection programme. Our protection work is ensuring that business in Berkshire essentially comply with the Regulatory Reform Fire Order 2005. Our specialist teams of fire inspection officers are available to support local businesses in complying with the legislation and enforce its compliance where necessary. In line with our risk-based inspection programme, we'll continue to audit the highest risk premises in order to ensure the safety of members of the public. So we're now working through a risk-based inspection register, so we know the highest risk properties within the county, and we're looking to target those on a much more frequent inspection programme as well. And this is something that our HMIC inspection that's coming up this year as well will have a real focus on, is how we are identifying the risk in a local area and making sure that we're responding accordingly to that risk. We'll continue to respond to changes in legislation and guidance related to building regs, fire safety, and our ways of working. Everything, sorry. Following the Grenfell Tower fire, again, a number of actions that came from that, and one is the new proposed fire safety bill, which builds on action taken to ensure that people feel safe in their homes. The bill will amend the fire safety order somewhat to clarify the responsible person or the duty holder for multiple occupied residential buildings, and what they do and what they must do to manage the risk for fire. And that includes the structure of external walls, buildings, cladding, balconies, windows, etc. The clarification will empower fire and rescue services much more to take enforcement action and hold building owners to account if they are not compliant with the new order. And this is a really positive step, but it will clearly have a significant impact on the capacity of protection teams within the service moving forward to make sure that we are using those powers appropriately and holding people to account where they're not performing as expected. Finally, we believe that sprinklers and suppression systems are clearly the most effective way to ensure that fires are controlled in those sorts of buildings or extinguished before fire service even arrives. Sprinklers can be included in design of new buildings and retrofitted during refurbishment of existing ones. They save lives, they reduce injuries, and they protect firefighters who attend these incidents, and obviously reduce the damage and the severity of any sort of incident. We have a statutory duty to consult on building consultations, etc., with local authorities, and that this is our opportunity at that point to really promote and push the use of whether it's a new build or retrofitting sprinklers in a current conversion that's planned. I think it's a really important position to move forward on and start to make common practice where we can, really. And any questions?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Members, if you've got any questions, please do raise your hands. David, I will say, though, is please be succinct in your questions because we still have 3 other items on this tonight. So I'm going to try and limit the questions to about half an hour if possible. So Paul, Sam, Clive, I saw hands, and Shirley. So we'll start off with Paul and we'll just go around the room.
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. Again, very, very helpful. You mentioned about the high-rise residential buildings, and some of those are in interim measures. Is there a deadline for landlords or the responsible person, I think you mentioned later on, to comply with those? And what happens if they don't? And does that mean you need more enforcement officers to undertake this work?
And I'm just going to add one on for Paul there as well. Is there any in Wokingham Borough?
So just to go back to that enforcement, just a little bit around that, and I'm stretching out of my comfort zone with the protection work, but I'll do my best. So the ones in interim measures, it could be for a number of things. It could be around, as I said, failure to maintain suitable alarm systems. There could be a number of reasons for that. Now, obviously, the priority would be to work with the responsible person and help and support them through action plans to make corrective action to do that, because clearly to go to the extreme of prohibition activity, you're looking at potentially evacuating a number of people from their homes, which does create other issues. So the emphasis really is to work with the building owner. However, we do have the regulatory reform order. We do have the necessary powers to enforce where necessary and where appropriate. But I think it needs to be a real measured approach and make sure it's proportionate and takes into the needs of and understands the impacts of everybody that might happen. But clearly safety has to be a priority as well. So just around how we manage that's a really quite sensitive and it very much again depends on the approach from the responsible person. Quite often we identify some of these things and they're dealt with very, very quickly, and then clearly some aren't as as cooperative and compliant. So it's probably not a real straight answer with that one. You know, there's a number of factors that we need to consider essentially, but we do have the necessary powers should we need to, and we have in some areas to take the necessary action with prohibition. In terms of the number of protection officers, I think that needs to be based around our risk-based inspection programme. So, you know, we've got that register of our high-risk properties. We know the repeat visit periods, and therefore we plan our workforce around that. However, with the building safety bill that we're looking at, the full details aren't available to us at the moment. The likelihood is we will need an increase in staff to be able to address that and to the right standards, essentially. So that's something we're very aware of. And then in Wokingham Borough, there are very, very few that will come under a high-rise residential buildings. There's a couple in Bracknell, but there are that said, there are some buildings that have enforcement action against them within the area.
Right, thank you for that. From an air quality perspective, are you looking at a transition over to electric or low emission vehicles as replacements as and when they effectively wear out, come to the end of their life? Or are you looking at an accelerated programme to decarbonise the fleet?
Are you talking specifically about frontline appliances there?
The whole of your fleet, really?
Yeah, so a number of our, as I mentioned earlier, some of our fleet replacement vehicles, we've gone for a number of hybrid, we've gone for a number of electric. So we are slowly starting to introduce those. I think in terms of frontline appliances, I think there's definitely a little bit of work to do as to whether how that's going to be achievable, because it's not just getting from station to incident. It's, you know, they're continuing to run the pumps on the appliances for a period of time. So I don't think the technology is quite there. I know they've been trialing some fire engines, but it'd be, you know, it's certainly a direction we're looking to move towards. But I don't think it's there yet for us to be able to make a firm decision.
So probably your fire appliances are Euro 6 engines, I should think. They'll be the best you can probably get at the moment.
Yeah, there's quite, and there's a number of new that have come into our fleet, so they'll certainly be with us for a period of time going forward.
Just one final one for me, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any areas where the number of call-outs are reducing, in particular where they are linked to any of your prevention measures?
I think there's certainly, I wouldn't say there's specific areas in terms of geographical areas. I think there's certainly some successes that we're seeing with our prevention activity and our engagement. Obviously, similar to Andrew earlier, it's really hard to measure some of that following COVID, because what we've actually been able to do and achieve has been a scaled down service in terms of prevention, I suppose, would be the thing to say. But we're certainly working in those community safety partnership spaces with our colleagues to try and identify how we can do that. And those, you know, vehicle fires, for example, in Wokingham, deliberate vehicle fires was probably one of our sort of main issues in terms of deliberate fires. And we are seeing a slight reduction in those, but it'd be fair to say not a significant reduction at the moment. But it's you know, prevention activity is a really hard one to get a specific measurement on, I think. You know, understanding where we have and do make an impact is quite a challenge to really measure that. I think it feels like the right thing to do, and we are engaging with the right people. And we are seeing some small successes in some areas. But in terms of the safe and well activity, undoubtedly, you know, going into people's homes, fitting smoke alarms, giving them fire safety advice, you know, domestic dwelling fires has absolutely significantly reduced since that activity has been undertaken, and we're continuing to develop that. You know, I spoke about the revisits earlier and how we can improve that service even still. So that's probably one of our prevention successes, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question really was obviously coming out of pandemic, and as you know, a number of sort of hospitality, particular types of businesses, more than others, have been quite badly hit. I mean, do you know how? And I've seen this prevalent in other boroughs. How do you know how bad the problem is of sort of fraudulent fires or insurance fraud, and fires being set on purpose to buildings? And is that an issue, or has been an issue in our borough? Or is that how? What's the situation with that currently?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's not something that's come up on our radar. Certainly not on my radar, and that was within my role as a fire investigation officer as well. Worked very closely with Thames Valley Police, investigating fires locally. So not since the pandemic, mind you. But no, in answer to your question, it's certainly not something that's become apparent to us or to me since the pandemic, or before really, in the Wokingham area, if I'm perfectly honest.
Thank you.
Okay, Shirley.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Dave, for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions. One is you speak about your 18 new members of operational staff through the apprenticeship scheme, which it sounds like really good news. And I just wondered how you got staff before, if this is a new apprenticeship scheme. How and what are the advantages over the apprenticeship scheme as opposed to the way you used to train staff? Sure.
So previously we would just go out for recruitment, run a recruitment campaign. Each service would run their own initial recruits course for new staff and then integrate them into the service. The apprenticeship scheme, if I'm honest, isn't a great deal differently to that. The obviously added bonus is there's a degree of funding that comes with apprenticeships, which we benefit from, absolutely. But other than that, in terms of the training, the Fire Service College pick up much of that training, which therefore gives a more standardised approach to the apprenticeship scheme as a whole. And then they come into the organisation and they go through what would be our normal development and assessment pathway that we would give to any firefighter that's previously joined with no experience as well. So it's, in essence, to answer your question, the big difference is there's a degree of funding that comes with taking on apprenticeships that we benefit from, and then we can enhance the training when they come back into service.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I think my second question, I think, is it comes out of something you've got in your presentation, but I think it's possibly might be a question more for Narinda or for Bill, if you don't mind. But it's actively promoting the use of sprinklers and suppression systems and retrofitting. And I seem to recall a couple of years ago we had a motion to council about putting sprinkler systems into all our schools, and it would seem timely to ask whether that has been completed in all Wokingham Borough schools. If anyone knows the answer.
I think I could give you an answer that it probably hasn't. I think, having young children, I can probably say quite confidently that hasn't happened. I live in Wokingham as well. So in terms of our role, absolutely, great thing to do. However, looking at risk, looking at really where we would want to target in terms of risk, we would really look at sleeping risks. Schools, yes, they have a lot of young people in, but actually in terms of risk, they're actually we would consider them pretty low risk. That said, I wouldn't advise not getting sprinklers. Why wouldn't you? If you've got that opportunity, but clearly the cost that's associated with that is probably a massive deciding factor for schools.
Right.
I will also say this because it is management committee do monitor motions. If my recollection is correct, it wasn't retrofitting, but it has gone into all new schools that have been built. So, for example, Matthews Green, for example.
Right.
I cannot recall right now if the retrofitting was in the wording of the motion, but I do know about from the new aspect. It's definitely there.
But I couldn't be sure now. I have to say it was a while ago, but it just seemed timely to mention that. So all the new schools in the borough, you think are.
I know that they are.
They are.
Angus, do you want to quickly jump in on this as you've turned your camera on? You're still on mute, by the way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chairman, that it was retrofitting just doesn't work. But all new schools we've made efforts to and succeeded And I think, Dave, the point that really we've made about sprinklers in schools is not the danger of a fire, but the consequent destruction and community impact of having a school closed because it's burnt down.
Yeah.
So that's the bigger element to it, not the fact that there's a risk to children because there's fire protection and get everybody out.
Sure.
Rochelle, you've already also indicated. Do you want to add something here quickly? So I know you're both you and Angus are on the fire. I forget what it's referred to these days.
We only had for new buildings and for new extensions and things like this. We did not say retrofitting at all, because retrofitting is a problem. Angus said, and just as David said.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Rochelle. So yeah, it was.
Thank you very much.
Refitted rather than retrofitted. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Shirley?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Clive. And then I'm going
Thank
to
you, Guy. Thanks for the presentation, Dave. Page 21, item number 2, introduce a risk-based programme to follow up safe and well visits for our most vulnerable residents. How many of those do you do in Wokingham? And how many, if you say you do 200 or 300 or whatever, how does that compare with other local authorities in Berkshire?
So
if you don't know, you could send us the answer.
I absolutely do know. If you just bear with us 1 second, I can give you what is planned in our local safety plans for next year. I can give you the exact figure if you just bear with me a second. I know across the service, so across Berkshire this year, we're looking at about 9,500 safe and well visits. Just bear with me, it's a bit of a meaty document to load up this one, so just be 2 seconds.
I should start introducing the countdown theme.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. So for Wokingham, this year ahead, we're looking at just shy of 1,000 safe and well visits for vulnerable residents across the year. So across Berkshire, across all unitaries, it was about 9,500.
So we're a bit less than the other boroughs, who would be roughly 1,500 each, maybe more. Maybe a bit more. Is that because we concentrate more in Slough and in Reading?
It's basically we try and do our safe and wells on a referral based approach. So we work with where we get the referrals for the most vulnerable people, and that's how we kind of balance across our safe and well numbers. So historically, where the biggest referrals come in, that's where we obviously put most of our resources and aim to achieve the highest figure to meet the needs of those referrals.
Okay, so we're not getting too many referrals from Wokingham at the moment.
I think we are getting a significant amount of referrals. I mean, just in comparison, it is slightly less than some of the areas, but.
Sorry, road safety programme, including targeted activity for motorcyclists based on risks. So how many motorcyclists do you contact? How do you decide which ones are at risk? Is it age, either young or old, or
it's more
caught speeding and all that sort of, I don't know.
It's basically done through local groups, local motorcycling groups. The at-risk element is identifying the fact that motorcyclists as road users are probably more at risk. So therefore we run specific programs for them. And I think there's the Be a Better Biker they have a meet every third Sunday, I think it is, at St Crispin's School. So they're people that we work with quite a lot. And then we'll host those Be a Better Biker. We provide a venue for them to host those Be a Better Biker courses on stations to allow them to run more courses and reach a greater audience, essentially. So that's kind of how we work it and we develop it. The Biker Down courses, we run a number of those. Again, we go through motorcycling groups and put that on as a need basis. Again, it's a voluntary scheme that we run, but as we encourage people to take that up, we'll run as many courses as the demand is, essentially.
Okay. Have we ever looked at an analysis of somebody who has an accident on their bike to see whether they are somebody who attends Be a Better Biker and the other group that you mentioned?
That's not something we have at the moment. It's a really good area to, in terms of evaluation in some of those activities. I think that would be a really key area of focus, but it's certainly not something that we have at the moment.
Just to jump in there here as well, from that idea from Clive, I think that's also something that you should be talking about with your police and the ambulance and local NHS services, because 9 times out of 10, if someone goes off their bike seriously, it's usually involving an ambulance as well. So it may be something that Triforce's investigation could look into. Sorry, Clive, it just occurred to me as an idea.
Absolutely, and it does sit very well with the Road Safety Partnership. And I could be doing them a disservice saying that they're actually not looking into it at the moment, but be wrong of me to say they are, because I'm not aware of it. But that partnership is very much an active partnership in the area. So you're right, it'd probably be a nice piece of work to sort of look into.
Yeah, I'd just be keen that we try to actually get to the people who are likely to have an accident, because somebody who is attending Be a Better Biker is probably less likely to have an accident than somebody that doesn't do that. Would that be, I guess that's right, is it? But we think it is. I feel it.
If I was to have a subjective sort of, I mean, it's the more responsible person that's going to come voluntary and seek out those sorts of activities. It'd probably be fair to say. Ultimately, we want to be targeting our activities at the risk. We want to be able to identify the risk and target our activities appropriately. And that's something we need to develop. Certainly mopeds, potentially, and things like that. That's where we need to sort of try and look at sort of engaging a little bit more and understanding how we can make this an attractive course for that sort of demographic, I suppose.
Okay, thanks. And then a question about fire cadets. So we're the only borough in Berkshire that doesn't have a group of fire cadets. How are you going to change that?
Well, ultimately, it's certainly on my plans to instigate in this year. I've already had the conversations around getting that done. I don't think it's the most difficult thing to actually get put in place now. We've already had some conversations with Community Safety Partnership, who are really keen to get on board and support it in the local area. And so I think it's a case of not if, I think it is a case of when. There isn't any resistance against it at the moment. Everyone thinks it's the right thing to do. We've seen the successes that it's had in other areas. So it's just a case of that expansion of what is a successful project.
Do you think it will happen soon then?
I'm pretty confident that it's something I would, I've certainly set my plans on it being this year or being up and running by the end of the year. That's something I'm very keen to see. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Clive. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, David.
Evening.
A quick question, because I didn't see any mention in your presentation with regards to first responders, or if you have an arrangement co-responders with SCAS. Could you give us an indication of the activity that there is across the Wokingham area in that regard?
Sure. So we don't actually have any co-responding activity that happens in the Wokingham area. We have upskilled all of our frontline operational firefighters into sort of a trauma care essentially, and equipment as well to complement that. So when we are arriving on scene, we are much more equipped, much more trained, and much more capable to deal with those immediate trauma issues. But in terms of responding solely for that activity alongside ambulance service, that's not something we are currently doing in Wokingham at the moment.
Is that a policy, permanent policy, or it just hasn't? We just haven't got to that yet.
It's not really a question I can answer, to be honest. I really don't know the position on that as the service at the moment. I know it's something that's been trialled. It has presented some challenges, but also some positives as well. So whether that's something that we look into going forward, I couldn't say, if I'm honest.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, Angus, I know you want to have a quick speak, and then I'm going to go back to Paul, as he's indicated he's got some more questions. So Angus, you got anything to add? Is your hand still up?
Thanks, Chairman. No, all I was going to do, because Dave's covered a very wide range of things there, but just to tell your committee that Berkshire enjoys being one of the top quartile services in terms of how it's viewed nationally, and it's in the bottom quartile for what it charges the residents. So I think that's part of a very ongoing good news story. I was just thinking that this report that you've received, do you think it would be a good idea that is actually sent out to all councillors, so that everybody does get the benefit of knowing the support and the work that's been done?
Thank you, Angus. We will make sure that this does go out to all councillors in that regard. So yeah, Paul.
Thank you. It was more of a comment actually, because the other questions have actually been asked, and it was going back to the point that Clive made about motorcycles and motorcycle incidents. When there's a road traffic collision, of course, the police do attend if there's been a casualty, and you need to go through the police and the Stat 19 forms to see what the causation factor is, because it may not have been the motorcyclist's fault. It may have been a vehicle coming out from a junction or something like that. And therefore, any particular course that they've been on may not have actually looked at that particular issue. So it may not have been their fault. So it's the causation factor that needs to be investigated.
Absolutely, and we know, part of that is there's a number of campaigns the police run in terms of bike aware and etc. to be considerate of that as well. It's not as largely a part of the issue is that bikers aren't seen, or they're in blind spots, which can cause accidents. So it's a really valid point.
Yeah, think bike is one that they do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. I've just got one quick question, because it's fire and rescue service, isn't it? Is the true title in reality, but everyone still refers to it as the fire service as opposed to that. However, we know that in recent decades that the amount of fires, especially being reported to, has decreased thanks to improved safety, improved alerting, etc., etc. Just quickly, in terms of percentages, what is the responses that you are dealing with that are actually physical fires as opposed to other incidents such as road traffic collisions, people being trapped in a lift, entrapment, things like that, the actual rescue part of the job, as it were?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go back to this document here. I mean, I can't give you the full percentage off the top of my head, but can certainly give you the sort of the top considerations or top sort of incident types that we're looking at now.
That'd be useful.
Yeah. So if we were to sort of look at false alarms actually being, probably our top one at the moment, and there's a number of categories that sit within false alarms as well. Many of you will be aware that we're currently consulting with the public in terms of how we do respond to automatic fire alarms at the moment. And hopefully that's something you've all seen and you know, taken the opportunity to feedback on. That'd be fantastic. Sitting below that then is road traffic collision and special services. So special service, that incorporates how we support our colleagues in the ambulance, so SCAS, whether that's gaining entry for SCAS or supporting them dealing with bariatric patients. And then coming under that is responding to fires. So that could be primary, what we class as primary fires and secondary fires. So primary fires, to put it quite simply, would be sort of your insurable stuff. So your house, your car, you know, and then secondary fires would be fence panel sheds. That's probably the easiest way to sort of categorize that. So they would then come under in third place behind those two. And that's the incident types that I've just gathered that data from Wokingham Borough as well, but it's probably fairly consistent, if I'm honest, across the county.
That'd be very useful to see those full numbers if you could share them around. And I also see Rachel's just made a comment in the chat, also about fire rescue along the Thames and helps with flooding problems. So yes, that is another important one that we need to consider as well. I did have another question, but I suspect I'll have to write it in an email because my brain then went to false alarm. Oh, that was it in regards to the false alarms. So this is a question more related to my award, as it were. But as a former resident of Childs Hall in University of Reading well over a decade ago now, I seem to remember being woken up due to a false alarm in that building many times and having to stand out in the rain at 2 or 3 in the morning as the fire brigade turns up and basically sweeps the building. I presume that due to the improvements in the features within those new halls there rather than the old halls, that the amount of false alarms in those specific university halls has decreased dramatically. At least I hope it is, because I really didn't enjoy standing in the rain for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to that responsible person as well, and the management systems they have on site, and putting some of that ownership back on the responsible person to sort of put some mitigation in around those false alarms, and making sure detectors are in the right places and bits and pieces like that. So there's probably a number of factors that have contributed to that and improved that.
Good, thank you. Shirley, one last one, and then I think we'll let David go. Enjoy the rest of his evening.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a real quickie, and it just born out of you were talking about the ratio of different types of calls that you get, and something that we seem to see a lot more of now, particularly in the summer, is heathland fires and open space fires. And I wondered if you're finding that numbers of those are increasing, and some of those I think are started maliciously or possibly carelessly. So it was more about whether that's something that how you're tackling that, really.
Yeah. Interestingly, you know, I haven't got any specific figures, but anecdotally, you know, we actually did see a spike through the lockdown period of whether it was pretty much down to young people looking for an opportunity to congregate somewhere, and that we did see an increase at that period. As we've come out of the sort of lockdown, we haven't got into that season yet of wildfires where we would typically see an increase in wildfires. So probably April through to sort of August, September maybe. So I think we'll just have, you know, it's a case of looking and see how that plays out going forward. But there was the big difference we did see was through the lockdown period. We saw a number of increased fires of that type specifically.
Yeah, because I remember there was one last year, wasn't there? And all the trains to Waterloo were stopped for several days, and it took quite a long time to put that one out. But anyway, thank you for that. It was just a bit of a curious.
No, that's fine.
Curiosity.
Yes. Thank you, David. I think there's a couple of questions there, especially those statistics I asked for earlier. That'd be very useful. But all I can say is we will share this with the rest of the council. I think it's a very important piece of work that you're doing, and from all in all, it just keep up the good work and just keep working with us, with the police, in driving this forward. So all I can say now is thank you very much for your time. And yeah, have a very good rest of your evening. We'll move on to the other stuff. So feel free to stay if you want, but I would head off.
I just if I could just say before I shoot off as well, we are just about to release the local safety plan for Wokingham Borough, which kicks in from the 1st of April. So that will be available on the website. So if you are interested in looking at the specific activity in the Wokingham area and feeding back, then by all means, yeah, I'd be pleased to hear from any of you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item number 78. So we're going straight from fire to floods. So we're going the flood risk strategy. I believe that's Boniface and Francesca who are leading on that. So who's speaking? Boniface. Okay, Boniface wins the best shirt of the night award. I love that.
Thank you, Chair.
Fire away.
Right. Good evening, everybody. And my name is Boniface Ngu, and I'm the flood risk manager at Wokingham Borough Council. And I've been in secondment in this position for just over 2 years now. I'm going to give a brief rundown of what we have been doing over the past 12 months. And as a lead local flood authority, we have the responsibility to manage flood risk from surface water and groundwater within the borough. Over the last 12 months, I have listed a couple of items in the report, 9 of them, that I am going to give a brief summary on. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation like Andrew and David, so I'm just going to be doing a lot of talking and hopefully get questions at the end. On point number 1, we have carried out CCTV surveys with drainage. A lot of the system is underneath the ground, which makes it difficult to see with the naked eye. So we need to use closed circuit TV surveys to be able to determine the state of the infrastructure. And in the last 12 months, we have carried out 6 of those, and that has helped to improve the drainage in those areas, hence reducing the number of complaints that we get from there. On point number 2, looking at capital drainage works within the borough, we have 2 major schemes that are going to be carried out in 2022-23. And we are looking at the Barkham Right scheme, where there is a pipe system that needs to go in to connect a redundant drainage gully into a Thames water network. This scheme has been fully designed, and we were just waiting to have road space to be able to do the work, because at the moment there are loads of works that are going on in the Barkham area, in the Finchamstead area, that has led to this work not to be carried out as yet. But there is a possibility that very soon this work is going to be carried out. We also have the Church Lane flood alleviation scheme, which has been in the pipeline for a while now, but due to unforeseen circumstances, there is a high voltage power cable that has led to a redesign of the scheme that we thought we had grips of. But the redesign is currently taking place, and hopefully the scheme will be implemented in this coming financial year. When it comes to flood risk and drainage, we have two main aspects. We have the reactive maintenance aspects, and we have the planning aspect. Reactive maintenance looks at the drainage infrastructure that we have and making sure that they keep working as they should, to help reduce flood risk from the highway infrastructure, and also to prevent flood risk to properties. And we, on the planning side of it, we do respond to planning applications for development within the borough. And so far, this year, 2021-22, we have commented on 750 planning applications, and we are not even at the end of the financial year, compared to last year, where at the end of the financial year we had 634 applications that we looked at. It is a considerable increase from what we had last year. And talking about reactive maintenance, we do gully maintenance as well as maintenance of the pipe system. But this year we try to be smarter in the way we carry out maintenance, and we introduce the smart drainage trial, which we had in 3 localities of the borough. And after a year of operation, we couldn't generate enough data to be able to determine the efficacy of the system. So we're going to run the trial for another couple of months to see what data we generate, because we were looking at determining silt levels from these smart drainage sensors, so that we would not be reacting to drainage maintenance, but rather be proactive and be able to pick areas that are prone to flooding from the sensors, sending back information to let us know that a gully is filling up and needs cleaning. We also have a lot of manholes within the borough, and we have a responsibility in accordance with the Highway Management Maintenance Program to make sure that maintenance within these manholes is carried out at least once every 5 years. In the last year, we commissioned the clearance of 1,250 of these gullies. Also, we do work in partnership with the utilities provider, Thames Water, to ensure that where our systems link with their systems, the systems are clear and running freely. And at the moment, we are trying to look for areas within the borough where we can generate schemes that would help to improve on the rate at which runoff finds its way into the Thames Water system. And hopefully, from Thames Water funding, we should be able to have schemes that would help alleviate the system overload in the Thames Water network. Also, we have a series of designations where we have development which comes in and has infrastructure that has to do with flood risk reduction, for situations where they are critical infrastructure, we would designate this structure as a critical structure and make sure that where residents or homeowners are made aware that they can't tamper with those structures without, first of all, passing through the council and getting consent for any works to that asset to be done. And looking at the borough generally, we have a lot of flood risk and drainage assets, and we have a database that keeps all this information, the state in which they are and how often they are maintained, to be sure that should an incident happen, we would be able to respond appropriately to make sure that flood risk to residents and property is reduced. And in summary, that is the flood risk and drainage update that we have had over the last financial year.
And you are very popular, Boniface. Everyone's hands up. So thank you very much for that. That was very useful. We've also got the documentation in front of us as well. I'm going to go with the first person whose hand shot up, which was Shirley. And then we will go around the room based on however I feel like it. So Shirley, go ahead.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Boniface. One of the things that you mentioned, you touched on, was commenting on planning applications. I assume that those are major planning applications rather than, just somebody building an extension to their house. And this is an area that interests me because in the ward that I live in, people are destroying their front gardens and turning them into car parks. And some of them no longer even have a blade of grass. It's just a big slab of concrete on which they park 8 or 9 cars. And this worries me because if it continues, where is the water going to run off to? And I have to declare an interest here because I live at the bottom of a hill. But joking aside, it does concern me because it seems to me that planning themselves have no tools in their armoury to prevent this. But as flood risk management is a statutory obligation, surely there should be some means for planning to be able to prevent and make residents at least keep a percentage of soft vegetation in their gardens and not concrete over the whole thing. And I just would be interested to know your views on this and whether there are any tools in the armoury that could be brought into play. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. I'll answer your question in 2 halves. In relation to whether it's a major or household application, we look at all applications. It's not only the major applications. So we have a lot of household applications that come through to us, and the 750 that I mentioned, this includes major as well as the minor applications. In terms of the conversion of grass areas to car parks, when we receive that kind of application, what we do is we question whether it is a permeable surface that is being used, and we encourage or we push for a permeable surface to be used, because the permeable surface will kind of act like a grass area, because it will allow any rainfall to seep in to the attenuation that is beneath the permeable surface. So yes, we would look at this kind of application, and if a tarmac area is being proposed, we will push for a permeable surface to be used rather than the tarmac.
Yeah, it's pushing for it is one thing, but have planning got any tools in their armoury to actually enforce people to put in a permeable surface? Because this is what certainly concerns me, because I see acres and acres of tarmac. I see acres of this printed paving going down. I see vast areas of just plain concrete going down, and I don't see as many areas of permeable paving as I would like. I mean, I think brick paving is permeable because you've got sort of sand. That's fine if it were that. But I think a lot of people are going for the cheapest cheap option, and it just concerns me that we have no power to stop this.
When we look at the application, and we recommend the permeable paving for the application to be approved, we need to see the drawing, and if the drawing has it marked there as permeable, then we know that it is permeable. But if it is not highlighted in the drawing that is approved, we would be recommending that it is permeable paving that is used rather than concrete. Because the first thing we are pointing out is the impermeable area is increasing, and that is going to generate more runoff. And we don't want that to happen, because more runoff means whoever is further downstream is the one who is going to suffer.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's probably a question we need to ask planning at some point, how they enforce this going forward. But thank you, Boniface.
Francesca, do you want to come in here if you've just appeared on screen?
Oh yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think there's an education piece that needs to happen in relation to this as well, because I fully agree with Charlie's point. I think we've already looked at opportunities on a Berkshire scale. So our counter authorities also have exactly the same issue where people are coming in, tarmacking over. But I think a lot of it is because there's a lack of understanding and knowledge about the fact that just doing something like that on a small scale, cumulatively, if everyone along a street is doing that, it's going to have a significant impact, because it is going to reduce the permeable area. And then if you're at the bottom of a hill, like you say, the runoff's going to get down there, etc. So I think there's opportunities for us to support residents through education. We have coming in the new financial year a number of social media pieces that are going to be going out in relation to reducing flood risk across the borough and what residents can do to support in that effort as well. And also on top of that, we're going to be releasing some information within our newsletters that go out. And we're also working with an organisation called the National Flood Forum, which is an organisation that does a significant amount of work with residents in at-risk flood areas. And they're really skilled in advising on things like this, not only on permeable paving areas, but also on helping residents to introduce things like rain gardens, planted roofs, etc., using water butts to harvest the rainwater. So yeah, just to reiterate, I think there's definitely more of an education piece that we can do, and I think moving forward over the next financial year, through some of the work that we're doing with the communications team, we'll be able to support with that. But on top of that, liaising with planning on whether there are any opportunities to really enforce that, because I think that's the problem at the moment. Like you say, there's no mechanism for enforcing it, and whether we can move to a position where we can start enforcing things like that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Francesca. Yeah, I think it would definitely be something that a discussion piece for with planning, because if we have a statutory obligation to reduce flood risk, then we need planning to be on side, and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add on that, actually, I've just had a thought. So we have a SUD strategy, which we adopted, I think, back in 2018. And that went through a significant consultation process, and it sets out our expectations on a local level of what we would want to see within a planning application and any works in relation to flood risk management. And I wonder whether there's opportunity for us to review some of the policies or the actions within the SUD strategy, potentially look at whether there's an option to make it an SPD, and really make it clear within the strategy that we expect to see permeable paving when anything to a parking area takes place.
That sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Boniface and Francesca. Let me start off by saying from the perspective of my ward, which is Norries, everything's not perfect, but over the last few years there have definitely been improvements, and the amount of flooded roads have improved over that time. So you are doing some good work, especially in the face of what have been some pretty terrible storms in the last while. So thank you for that, and thank you for the report. I actually wanted to ask quite a blunt question, really, which is with regards to the large developments that are happening around the borough. Would you say that you are confident that developers are implementing optimal drainage solutions on those developments, or are there cost compromises that perhaps are occurring or have occurred that we might all regret?
Thank you for that question, Phil. It is an absolute blunt question, and I'll try to give as clear-cut an answer as possible. When we look at development and what it brings, the first thing we do is how much impermeable area is being created. And the next thing we look at is, okay, of this impermeable area that is being created, how much of it are you accommodating? And of what you are accommodating, is majority of it above the ground? Because we have noticed that when drainage systems are below ground, it is difficult for you to see what is happening to them. And you only realize there is a problem when it starts manifesting above ground. So we encourage above ground attenuation features like source basins, detention basins, ponds, swales, things that are above the ground that could be easily seen if there are issues. So yes, we are confident because when we ask for calculations to justify how much runoff is being generated by the development, we are looking at an increase to the 1 in 100-year flood event, and we are also looking at climate change. So yes, we can be confident that for the 1 in 100-year plus 40% climate change, which is what we are asking for at the moment, the runoff generated from this scenario will be taken care of by the drainage features that are incorporated in the development.
Yeah, thank you very much. Does that include some of the external ditches which are external to these developments, which clearly play a big part in that? Because I see when I'm walking my dog that they're not always as clear as they should be. And of course, rains don't wait for the moment they've all been cleared. So is there a programme to make sure that that additional supporting network is working as well as it should be as well?
Thank you again. With regards to receiving ditches, there is a riparian responsibility for landowners that have ditches running next to them to maintain those ditches. And for new development that goes in somewhere, discharging into an existing ditch, they have those attenuation features which limit discharge to the greenfield rates before that development went ahead. And it is as much as the developer will clear the ditch where at the point of discharge, the ultimate responsibility rests with the riparian owner. And at the moment, we are seeing plenty of cases where riparian owners are not carrying out their riparian responsibilities, and we are writing to them to notify them that they have a responsibility as riparian owners to make sure that the ditches that they own or the ditches that run next to their property is their responsibility to maintain.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed for your frank answer.
Francesca, do you want to come in here as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Bonnie said in that, so we are starting to write to riparian owners, not starting to, we have been for a while, but we write to riparian owners because we have powers under the Land Drainage Act to carry out land drainage enforcement. So where a riparian owner hasn't been clearing out their ditch and they've been written to by us asking them to do so, and then they still continue not to clear the ditch out, we have powers to serve an enforcement notice. On top of that, we have powers through our recently adopted Wokingham specific land drainage bylaws, again to get them to carry out works to clear their ditches. So we've got a few cases across the borough at the moment where we're currently engaging with the landowners, and it will turn into an enforcement issue if they continue not to clear their ditches. In a lot of cases, I think people are not aware that it's their responsibility, either through land ownership issues, they think the ditch is the neighbours, or they think it's the Highways Authority responsibility. So more often than not, when we write to the riparian owner, they will then get the work done to clear it. But in certain circumstances where someone just isn't prepared to carry out the work, we've taken enforcement action against them. But with regards to developers, we also include an informative within the planning application response to say that they need to ensure that the system immediately downstream is clear. So there's various different options that we've got to make sure that when a development goes in, we ensure that the system downstream has the capacity to take the greenfield runoff.
Thank you for that. Clive, and don't take everyone's questions.
Thank you, Guy. I think my question may well be for Fran. Have we got any news on the flood alleviation scheme on the River Loddon that was going to protect the Showcase Cinema and parts of Lower Earley?
Yeah, so we applied for funding through the DEFRA Innovation Flood Resilience Fund, and we were unsuccessful in obtaining the funding, which was very surprising to us given the extent to which we'd carried out the feasibility work. Some of the schemes that have actually received funding from the scheme were in a lot earlier stages than ours, so we were quite surprised about that. Having said that, it potentially could be as a result of the fact that the Environment Agency have now opened up a scheme within the wider Thames catchment area, which involves looking at various different locations along the Thames and the River Loddon to essentially store water or hold back water. And one of those locations is the location south of the M4. So the Environment Agency at the moment are progressing with investigative works in relation to that scheme. It kind of makes sense because we are the lead local flood authority, which means we have overall responsibility for surface water and groundwater. flooding, and the Environment Agency have the overall responsibility for fluvial flooding. The reason that we started looking at the scheme was because of our concerns around Showcase Roundabout, and the Environment Agency at the time didn't seem to be taking any action. So we thought to ourselves, well, let's step in, see what we can do to get funding, etc. So then we progressed it through that route. But having said that, now the Environment Agency have stepped in and are looking at several locations across the Thames and Loddon catchments to store water. So they're currently investigating that further, working with stakeholders such as the University of Reading, etc., to move that forward.
So one of the areas they're looking at could be to hold back water to protect that bit of Lower Early and Showcase Cinema. Any idea of any timescales?
So I suspect with a scheme of this on this scale, we're talking about several years, because in holding back water south of the motorway, essentially what they're going to be doing is creating a kind of reservoir situation. And then if you're getting into reservoir territory, you've got to look at Reservoir Act, etc. They're going to have to look at formalising the structure at the base of the embankment of the motorway as well. And then there's other opportunities there as well. So not only in holding back the water, they could also be creating ecological biodiversity opportunities, and there's potentially opportunities for generation of hydroelectric power through the channeling of water underneath the motorway. So it's a very large scale project. I suspect we're talking about several years. I can't confirm anything. It's too early stages at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry. I was just going to add to what Fran has said. It is early days, and there was a first round of consultation for the Thames Valley Flood Scheme, which went out and they consulted for 3 months between October and January. So they are reviewing the comments from that consultation, which will then feed into the second part of the project, which will be looking at generating an outline business case to support the scheme.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add something here as well, Boniface, because I know that the University of Reading has looked at this for many years. Some of the people I went to university wrote dissertations on this exact topic, so it is something that is being taken quite seriously in the Environment Agency, and yeah, we're years away from this happening. Clive, carry on.
If it's years away, it's a real shame, but
it's the scale.
Yeah.
It's the pure scale of it.
Yeah. Is the piece of land that is being considered as the space where the water is going to be held back same piece of land that is Hall Farm, sorry?
So it's the section which is on the western side of the river, which is currently within the master planning proposals allocated as what they call Eco Valley. So it's an area which will be public open space, and that's why I mentioned opportunities with regards to ecology, biodiversity, etc.
Thank you.
Anne.
I was just thinking, this might seem a bit minor compared to other things, but in Woodley at certain times of year, I live in Woodley, it feels as if we're all on a sponge, and sometimes some of the drains actually overflow and water flows into the road and so on. One specific place where this happens is the centre of the Waitrose car park in Woodley. But I just wondered, is there anything that can be done about that, or do we have to really live with it?
When it comes to car parks, I would presume that there are drainage gullies there that link up to the wider network. And it could be an issue of the gully being blocked, or the pipe linking the gully to the wider network being blocked. And we could get if we know the area, we could get the jetter to go out there and jet it out to see if it is going to improve on the drainage.
Are the gullies, they're on the surface, I suppose, are they?
Yeah, the gullies are on this. The gully crates are on the surface, and then they sink into a pipe that then takes the water off into the wider drainage system.
Right, what I'd say is there are no gullies in the Waitrose car park. I'm pretty confident about that.
Right.
What happens is the water comes out of the drain itself. So I think the water level is actually higher than the ground level. That's what it seems like.
I think there's a conflict in terms here, and when they're referring to gullies, it's also the drainage pipes underneath the surface as well. It is just a common English language problem that some people will talk about. Let's take ICT, and we all look around and think, oh, ICT, but to Philip, who I believe still works in a hospital, that's the intensive care treatment. So it's that sort of problem, I think, there. But as someone whose daughter loves jumping in puddles, and that particular one in the Waitrose car park that Anne is referring to, I'm certain Shirley knows it as well, and having got absolutely soaked the other week, can we get someone with the camera out to take a look around that car park, because it does flood, especially in that central park between the two forward parking meters constantly.
I strongly suspect that it's something to do with the roots of the plane trees.
I think you might be right, but I think we need to get the little CCTV rat out, because I know I call it the CCTV rat because I know it's a little thing that just rolls around pipes, just to look at that particular location, because yeah, I'm absolutely sick of getting my trousers absolutely soaked by a 5-year-old. Carry on, Anne.
Yeah, thank you for sort of corroborating me there. So it sounds as if you're saying that most probably when water comes out of drains, it's not that the water level is actually higher than the ground, it's actually probably that the drain is blocked. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
It could be that the drain is blocked, because if the drain was functioning properly, it would perform its function of draining the water away. And the only thing that would stop that from happening is when there is a blockage in the system. And yes, the jetter in the first instance can go out there and then jet through.
Right.
To see if it's going to flush whatever blockage is in the system away.
Oh, well, that was definitely a good thing to try. Thanks very much. The other thing I was wondering about is you're suggesting that a way of sort of reducing flooding could be to presumably you're planning to thinking of things like ponds or swales in grass verges in strategic places. I forget what that is in this. Sustainable urban drainage. Have I got that right? So that it could be that certain grass verges will perhaps turn into a pond or something.
Yes. Yes, they would become sustainable drainage systems. Most probably within the public open space, rather than the verge.
Oh, right.
Because the verge is not going to be large enough to store considerable amounts of water, but in the public open space, you have more room to play with, and you can form the basin such that it is shallow enough for people to still be able to use it to play, and only function as an attenuation structure in large rainfall events.
Right. So perhaps, sorry.
It is not going to be flooded all the time.
No.
But only when you have significant rainfall, and we're looking at the 1 in 100 flood event plus climate change.
I think
under normal circumstances, the basin will be dry.
Right. So in built-up areas, that might have to be in the parks, I suppose, mightn't it? Presumably. I mean, there aren't any, open spaces in some areas.
In build-up areas, we would be looking at retrofitting of SUDs, which is what Fran touched on earlier. And you'll be looking at tree pits. You'll be looking at attenuation crates. You'll be looking at green roofs, just to make sure that there is some kind of mitigation to hold back the flows before they get back into the network.
Right. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Just to add to that, so I think that the section in the report that refers to that is under the section talking about partnership working with Thames Water. So Thames Water have a significant drainage system, obviously under the ground, and they often have capacity issues. So they have proposed a programme with the local authorities of identifying areas of land in built up areas, so perhaps roundabouts or grass verges, where there is potential for us to store the water that would have entered their drainage system, and hold it back until the drainage system further downstream is freed up, and ultimately release it at a slow rate into that, so that they improve their capacity issues. So Surrey Council, for example, has just carried out a pilot scheme where they have turned a roundabout within a cul-de-sac into a rain garden. And then what they've basically done is, where it was just a grass verge, they have created a rain garden system which is got loads of plants in it, and it's got shingle which helps with storage, and then a storage area underneath to hold the water before it actually enters the drainage system. And as a result, that reduces the capacity issues on the Thames Water network, and reduces flood risk. So there are potential opportunities. It's more difficult in built up areas because you've got less of that open space, and where possible, if there's parks and open spaces where we could put big attenuation basins to store the water, that's the ideal solution. But where you're in built up areas, some places of Wokingham, some places of Reading, we need to look at smaller areas like grass verges, roundabouts, etc., to be able to store stuff. So.
All right, thanks very much for explaining that. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Paul here, I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and propose that we formally extend the meeting past 10:30, because we've still got one more item to go after this. Can I have votes in favour of doing that, please? Okay, that's carried, so now we don't have to worry about the 10:30 stop. Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Guy. I've just got a couple of questions. Your point 1, Bonnie, on page 28, the second paragraph from the bottom indicates a 10-year programme of drainage pipe replacements. I could only find 200,000 per annum in the MTFP, page 77, full council agenda. Is that the programme? Anyway.
The 10-year program is a forward look, because at the moment we have a drainage network which has been there for quite a while, and we are seeing a lot of situations where the pipe system is collapsed and needs replacing. So that is where over the next 10 years we want to look at this gradual replacing of the pipes, because with 200,000 that wouldn't take us very far.
Yeah, so just
no, it's 200,000 per annum in the MTFP per annum. Is that the budget for the programme, or is it somewhere else?
So basically, as Bonnie says, we're looking at all of our pipe network across the borough, and I think we're talking about over 300 kilometres of pipe network. And because a lot of it was installed, 50, maybe even longer, 100 years ago, as Bonnie says, it's collapsed. It's not in very good condition. And so we need to start looking at a pipe replacement programme across the borough. We're in the process of looking at an investor save business case, because ultimately, once we've done all this replacement, we're less likely to have to be responding to flooding events because we'll have more capacity in the system, and there's not going to be blockages, etc. So we're looking at how we can develop a business case to fund that. The 200,000 that we've got at the moment each year isn't enough to cover something like that. Drainage infrastructure is some of the most expensive highways infrastructure, and so in order for us to be able to do that, we would need to put in some kind of business case for growth. There are also opportunities to apply for grant funding, etc., from DEFRA, Thames Water, so there's a lot of opportunities there. But the 200,000 that we have at the moment, we've had every year for the last however many years, probably a decade, maybe longer, and we use that to do capital replacement schemes like the Barkham drainage scheme that we talk about. So,
thank you. I didn't think it was enough at all. Hence my question. Moving quickly on to point 5 on page 29, the gully sensors. If the trial is successful, what's the round figure cost of installation of these against gully cleansing? Or putting it another way, what's your return period for an investment?
Shall I answer that? So basically, we have we're doing a pilot scheme at the moment. It costs £450 per sensor. I think that's the right cost, is it, Bonnie? £450 a sensor. And what we need to do is have a look at where we are going to be installing them. So are we only going to be installing them in the gullies in the high risk locations, or are we going to be spreading it out more widely? Ultimately, that will then lead to an investor save business case, and we will significantly reduce our annual gully cleansing, which at the moment we clean all of our gullies once a year, and a third of them that are high risk we clean twice a year. So the business case would be around how we use the sensors to reduce that annual gully cleansing, and I think we spend about £300,000 a year on gully cleansing, and so ultimately further down the line we generate that money back and spend less on the maintenance.
Thank you very much.
The beauty with the sensor is you can move it from one location to another. So you don't need to have a sensor in every single gully. You just need to have sensors in strategic locations and move them from street to street to get an understanding of how quickly they silt up and how frequently they need to be cleaned up.
Yeah, thank you.
Finally, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I think again from on the smart drainage trials, I think, for myself, I just want to say how much of a positive that is for myself as a councillor. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and I think as a big sort of issue of being a councillor, right, you get residents complaining about a blocked drain, and then you only know about it when there's an issue. So I think this will really help out solve this issue. So I just want to say, yeah, well done, and hopefully we can get this rolled out everywhere. So thanks.
Sorry about this, Bonnie and Fran. We seem to be having a drainage smell issue around here.
That's not drainage. That is not drainage, but that is a polite way of putting it, Phil.
Probably the foul side of your business.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's exactly what we think it is. Did you have anything else, Sam? Or okay, sorry, I was getting up to deal with the windows there. So if I've got no further questions because all of mine have been covered. If I do have anything else that comes to mind, I will email you. But Francesca Boniface, thank you very much for attending late in the evening. It is very important. It's always welcome to hear from you both. And all I can say is keep up the good work and keep us both informed. So we're now moving on to the next item, which I believe is Ed, Shayla and Bill, who will be taking this, which is the Enforcement and Safety Service Update on page 33, item number 79. So fire away, Ed.
Yes, good evening. Just to update you on the progress which you asked for at the last scrutiny meeting. So we go live next Friday, the 1st of April. Recruitment, we've believe has gone well. We've just got 3 posts which we will be filling. We've interviewed in recent weeks and a couple more interviews next week. So we've just got those 3 posts to fill. One of them is a service manager, so that's quite important. That's for the housing and pollution team. But the other 3 service managers are in place for environmental health and antisocial behaviour and the licensing manager. Because we go live next week, of course, we're heavily involved in the mobilisation. Some communications have gone out over last weekend and an article in the Borough News. We are getting the customer contact points sorted out. We want to create some online reporting. We're testing the system. It's still in its test mode. Civica, the supplier, are supplying us with an online reporting tool. When we get that working and tested and we know that it works, we will publicise it. In the short term, customers, members of the public are asked to contact the team directly by email. I've got the contact points later. Our officers, when they're out in the field, whether it's weekends or evenings, they'll have their smartphones and they can pick up emails almost instantly when they come in. The IT system has been copied over next week from West Berkshire onto Wokingham's server with all the data, the Wokingham data from previous years. And then, of course, we can start using it ourselves from the 1st of April. There'll be a new set of web pages next week on Wokingham's website. They were just putting the finishing touches to those. I was going through them today, spent a couple of hours just editing the pages to make sure they're all present and correct. Next week, we will be collecting some vehicles and some equipment from West Berkshire to bring back to Wokingham. Wokingham, of course, funded 1/3 of the Public Protection Partnership, so approximately 1/3 of the vehicles and equipment belongs to Wokingham, so we'll be using that from next Friday onwards. The Westcott Annex office space is all ready. It's now open, it's been redecorated and the IT has been installed. And we are in the middle of a training programme which started last week and goes right through to next Thursday before we go live with our new staff. So just to remind a few of the hours that the antisocial behaviour officers are going to work, 8 till 6 weekdays, Saturdays 10 till 6, Sundays 1 till 9, and Friday and Saturday evenings 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. So effectively that means from 8 a.m. on Friday, officers will be working in shifts through to 2 a.m. the next morning, and we're going to cover all the bank holidays except those 3. So that's my contact details, and the antisocial behaviour team manager is Gina Frost. We have 2 new managers for environmental health, that's Marcus Herbert, and the licensing manager is Kieran Hinchcliffe. And the public email addresses are unchanged there, environmental.health and licensing. The ASB@Wokingham is the new email address, which will appear on our new website next week and has been publicised in the communications channels that we've been using. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I hope that you're reassured that the project is all but ready to start next Friday.
Clive, and then Anne.
Hello, Ed. Thank you for your report. The antisocial behaviour is you're going to have people on duty for quite a long time. 8 till 6, I think you said Monday to Friday, 10 till 6, 1 till 9 Sunday, and 6 till 2 Friday and Saturday night. Was that right?
Yeah, they're all 8-hour shifts. So the 8 till 6 weekdays will be some people working 8 till 4 and some people working 10 till 6. So they'll overlap each other.
Okay. We have quite a lot of youngsters out and about in Wokingham town centre after 2 a.m. And so I think some of the venues in Wokingham don't close until 2. Would it have been better to have had people around until 3 or even 4.
I think you're right. Some of the late licenses are 3 a.m. It's a fair point that's been raised a couple of times, and I wouldn't disagree, except to say that our officers are simply civilian local authority officers. They don't have any arrest powers. They don't have the powers that police officers would have. So they'll be working for 2 all over the borough, not just in Wokingham town, depending on where the need arises. But if they are in Wokingham town during their working period up till 2 a.m, they'll be able to check licensing conditions, effectively fulfil the role of a licensing liaison officer with the licensed premises, and observe what's going on and gather evidence. So one of the things that needs to be done, for example, is trace where people have been and where things like broken glass is coming from. If we've got officers on the ground that can witness where it's coming from, then it gives us evidence to take things further with the licensed premises. So that they won't be able to replicate the role of police officers or even PCSOs because they don't have those powers. And it probably wouldn't be safe for them to be working on their own at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But other than that, I take your point.
Sounds like you considered it anyway.
Yeah, this is a topic that was raised on the work programmes aspect. That is one of the ones that Andrew is supposed to answer from the Thames Valley Police aspect, because it does tie into this and the cooperation aspect. So there's more answers coming along this as well. Carry on, Clive.
Right, and have we got a divorce settlement?
Yes, the report is going to the executive next Thursday, the 31st. So very soon that report will be published with the agenda, with all the details of the financial settlement with West Berkshire Council.
It should be released tomorrow if it is going next Thursday. I'm not going to ask you to tell us what it is a few hours before.
I'm grateful.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Anne?
Thank you. So just a couple of questions. Under services to be provided, pollution control, commercial processes, construction sites, water supplies, does that come under licensing?
Which aspect in particular? Commercial processes, construction sites and water supplies.
Yes.
Yes, in those 3 things are covered by environmental permits for some commercial processes that release pollution to the air, like dry cleaning and car spraying. Construction sites is dust and noise primarily, and private water supplies need to be not so much licensed, but they need to be registered with the council so that the water quality can be tested. So the owner of the private water supply has to pay a fee to have their water supply tested.
Oh, right. OK. So and then my other question was, which staff handle the issue of private housing, rented sector, caravan and mobile home parks?
We've got what we call a residential and environmental team. So they are people who work under a manager for private housing and environmental pollution, who will inspect private rented properties and houses in multiple occupation and mobile home parks and caravan sites. That's their main role. It's often called private sector housing as the shorthand for that role. There's sometimes environmental health officers, but equally they sometimes come from a housing background.
So are they listed on the previous page at all?
Services to be provided.
Well, on the previous page it lists the people who are being recruited.
They would be included in the environmental health officers, 2 seniors and 4.6 EHOs. Yeah, so they would come under that group of staff.
Oh, right. OK. Oh, well, that was what I was.
So there are 6.6 environmental health officers or private sector housing officers in that group. 3 of them will do the food hygiene and health and safety accidents at work investigations. So that's commercial environmental health, and 3.6 will be doing the residential, the caravan sites, the private rented and the pollution control work.
All right. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Shirley.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Ed, for your presentation. Yeah, the tasks for the new ASB service. If I were to say have a foul-smelling bonfire burning on a Sunday afternoon in my ward, is there not going to be a sort of hotline phone number that you can ring, or is it going to be a case of sending an email to asb@wokingham.gov.uk, and would that email account be being monitored the entire time that these new ASB officers are going to be functioning?
Yes, the message that we're seeking to promote is that residents can email the team direct, and in the modern day of smartphones, our officers will be carrying their emails with them effectively. So they can have that mailbox running on their phone, and any time that somebody emails them, the officers in the field will get that email almost instantly. If residents choose to phone, and I do understand that some people may not have access to the internet, may not want to use emails for various reasons, if they phone, they will get the message which says what the out of hours number is. And then if they ring the out of hours number, the call handler will take all the details, and then they will email the officer. So it's a slower process, but for people who don't want to use email or don't have the facility to do so, then the telephone system still exists. To put it in a nutshell, the option to ring the officers in the field is not there, because the idea is that officers will be dealing with issues. So they can't be answering the phone to another customer when they're in the middle of dealing with one or driving. So,
yeah,
so the email option or the online report, when we're confident in it, will be better.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, so how at any one time, how many of these ASB officers are there going to be out in the field responding to actual events and responding to emails?
We've got 10 altogether. On the weekends and evenings, it'll be 2 at a time. So 2 in the daytime, Saturday and Sunday shift, 2 on the Friday and Saturday evening shift. Probably on the Monday, given that we've got to rota people over the weekend, probably 2. Tuesday to Friday, it'll be more than 2, might be 4, might be 6. There'll probably be 1 day a week when we have them all in, because we want to do training and feedback. But so during the week, there'll be anything up to the full capacity of 10 will be available at any given time.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, that seems reasonable. I'm just kind of wondering if, at certain times of the year and certain times of day or night, they could just get inundated with emails and just not be able to cope.
Well, yes, the weekend and the Friday and Saturday evenings will be a small resource of just 2 officers. Hence, you'll note my hesitancy about getting involved in Wokingham town incidents after 2 a.m. when there's only 2 of them on duty. But it's still 2 more than we have had, and it will mean that there is a capacity to respond to residents' concerns. And of course, it will be very fascinating to monitor the level of demand from April to September. So come September, we will know by then what the level of demand has been through the summer, when we expect it to be at its most busy, and then determine what level of resource is appropriate for the winter.
Right, thank you. And just one real quick thing that's still pertaining to this. At the moment, with my, say, for example, I've got some residents who regularly have problems in the car park at the back of the leisure centre after hours. There's lads there with cars playing loud music and smoking weed and just generally being a nuisance. What they've been told to do at the moment is phone 111, 101, whichever one it is, which never seems to yield any response. I mean, is that the sort of circumstances where these guys could go out, or would that be a circumstance where it would still be the police to go out? I just wonder how we're going to educate the public on the differences between who they call for what.
Yes, I mean, ultimately the public will decide who they ring, whether they ring the police or ring the council. We can't necessarily control that, but our sticking point will be if there are crimes being committed, then it's more appropriate that it's a police matter. But if there's not specifically a crime being committed, possession of cannabis, of course, is technically a crime, but fairly low level. But where any drugs or alcohol are involved, our officers will be hesitant because of safety concerns, and they will have to risk assess whether it's safe to approach. But in most occasions in life in this area, it is safe to approach, and their approach will tend to be of an engagement level. It won't be an enforcement level, it won't be heavy-handed, it won't be rude, so as to avoid confrontations. And if there are confrontations or threats, then our officers will retreat and keep themselves safe. But there's no reason why they can't engage with young people and young adults. Experience shows that often an engagement method, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem there and then, but there's certainly no harm in trying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm looking around the room, I'm not seeing any more questions on this, but all I can say is, Ed, thank you very much for this. This is a very useful bit of thing. Bill, do you want to say something quickly? As you've just appeared. You're on mute still. I may be good at lip reading, but I'm not that good.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think if we look back, 12 months ago, and we looked at the task ahead of us, it seemed like a sort of monumental task to bring this all back in-house in the 12 months that was given. And I think, we've got to consider the whole object of this exercise is to improve the service to our residents. And that was the whole reason to do this. And I think, the way it's been handled over the 12 months and the problems that have been solved in, first of all, looking after the staff that have been involved in the upheavals and the changes that have taken place and the financial implications that have been involved, and the fact that we're out to improve the service to our residents. And I think the way that our officers, and that's Steve Brown, Steve Moore and Ed Shaler, have solved these problems can only be commended. And I thank them very much for the hard work that they've done. We've achieved it. We're here at almost April the 1st and we're ready to go. So I think it's a great achievement. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you pretty much covered, Bill, what I was going to say there, because it has been a long process. But Ed, thank you very much for your hard work on this, and my thanks to the team around them and for persisting with the challenges over the last 12 months, as Bill said.
Thank you.
So, Ed, Bill, thank you very much. You may now disappear if you so wish. We're now going to be looking at the agenda for next year, next municipal year. So we've got the work programme in front of us on the separate sheets. There are some aspects that have been referred to us by management, some of which are have already been covered tonight with questions to Thames Valley Police, for example. Now, I will address 19, which was actually submitted by Shirley on this, and myself, and Paul can confirm this as we discussed this for a short period at management. It is not really within our remit to do this. Instead, what we're going to have to do is start lobbying the government, because the entire process is very much archaic and from, am I being generous in saying 60 years ago?
1984 Act, Road Traffic Act. So not 60 years, but
40. 40. So on that one, what we will do is, I think we need to start lobbying the government to basically bring that particular act into the 21st century rather than the 1980s.
Yeah, I sort of understand that, and I guessed it was governed by some sort of ancient law. But I still wonder whether we can or highways could, alongside doing what's statutorily required of them, actually try and make it a little bit easier to understand for our residents, because, you know, the stuff that gets churned out is
a mess.
It is a mess and it is gobbledygook and people don't understand it. And I think, you know, we need to be, if we're going to take the trouble to say this is a consultation, you've got to give the public something that they can look at and understand what they're being consulted on. And so, you know, I take the point about lobbying government, but equally, I wonder whether there is some scope for some improvement that we could do alongside.
It's certainly something that we can ask, but I think it would probably need, I mean, Paul, this is your professional background. Is there anything off the top of your head you can think of that could improve it? Just as so we can at least circulate some ideas to highways?
Not really, because you have to, it's all based on legal documents, so it has to be through a legal template. So it's all written in a particular way and it's legal. Hence why when it's challenged, it can end up in court, and therefore you have to go back to the legal documentation of how it's written. So this is where it all comes very.
So nobody would be prepared to say, well, this is the legal document, and then put alongside, in simple English, this is what that means.
Too long didn't read version, as it were.
Nobody dare to do that, I guess. So, yeah, fair enough. I just feel it is something that probably all members have issues with, the length of time it gets these.
I'm certain we could go in, but we don't have the time to go into that in incredible detail. We'd need an entire meeting yelling at some of the archaic nature that we are dealing with. So we've also got one aspect that we would be looking at would also be around bus stops, which I suggested we look under the bus strategy aspect. So that would be quite easy. Footpaths and specifically around development and adoption, the aspect where we were considering on that was looking at it from it was planning and the planning aspect and the adoption of the estates processes. That's where we were looking to put that in. Local highways reviews, that's being looked at as well in regards to highways reviewing highway strategy and customer service, etc. So that's all been covered on that. Will be covered on that. And then it was one new item, completely new item, which is civil parking enforcement, which the only thing I can think of is due to the pandemic, it got completely missed and slipped off the roadmap. So that needs to come back in. And other than that, that's basically what we've been asked to do from a management point of view. So looking forward to the forward plan, the first meeting in May is the domestic abuse contract update, with update from executive members and directors. Callum, there's one additional item that would probably be a good fit into there, and that would be the arts and culture strategy, because I know that got delayed, but that should be a light enough item to fit into that gap as well. So I think for the 25th of May, that would be a good start for 10 on that one, because at least we can get that done and dusted, because understanding from the executive members and the directors what the plan is for the years ahead will be useful. The domestic abuse contract we need to review, and then the arts and culture would be, I think that would be an appropriate first meeting for the municipal year. July. Does anyone have any suggestions for July initially? Callum, jump in.
So the one thing, Chair, and it's related to what members have been receiving tonight, is the annual update on the Community Safety Partnership. Now, it all depends on when they publish their annual report, and I can't remember off the top of my head where it is. July might be the right time, so I'll liaise with Narinda on that one.
So pencil it in for now then.
Yep.
Does anyone have anything they want to look at in July? So if that's the case, then it might be worthwhile asking if because there will be little point into looking at the 11, which is the implementation of house enforcement safety and service, because that will only be about 3 or 4 months in at that point. So the bus strategy, it might be a better option to look at in July, because it should have come through processes by then. And civil parking enforcement would probably be best to go in there, because that way that gives them 4 months to put together a report, and it can be that at least gives at least 2 items of substance on that particular meeting to be looked at. September, I'm just looking down the list. Because right now it's got the mid-year budget review and then going into the budget, but with the grass cutting's over with management still, isn't it? So we don't have that, thankfully. So it might be worthwhile looking at potentially the scrutinising operations and performance of the council-owned companies before the budget kicks off in earnest. That might be a good idea to put that in for September. That gives a core, and that gives a solid 6 months of core work programme for this committee going forward. And then basically it's look at what's further coming down the line into October for the NTFB, etc. Does anyone have any objections to those suggestions? Okay, can I have do I need to vote in favour of that proposal, or is that just a no? Yes, I think that's agreement, yeah. So if that's the case, everyone, I think we can draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for attending. And we can draw the meeting to a close at 22:48 according to my watch. So those watching on Teams and online, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening, what's left of it.